I serve as chair of the committee. We have our committee members with us today who will participate themselves. Senator Albright will be joining by telephone. Senator Sanders, if you'll begin with your introduction.
Good afternoon. I'm Rita Sanders. I represent District 45, which is the Bellevue Offutt community.
Good afternoon. Tom Breese, I represent District 41.
Justin Lane, representing District 13.
Good afternoon, Danielle Conrad, North Lincoln Site 46.
And to my right is legal counsel John Duggar. And to my far right is committee clerk Shelley Schwartz. Assisting the committee today, I'll have one page if she'll introduce herself and tell us what she's studying.
My name is Caitlin Croft. I'm at University of Nebraska Lincoln, and my major is political science.
Thank you. The committee will hear the following legislative resolutions today: LR147, LR148, LR149 in a combined hearing. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time today, interim study resolutions are introduced by senators who believe that the legislature should investigate certain topics that may be the subject of future legislation. The Education Committee is here today to receive information about these topics. To help facilitate these proceedings and maintain an accurate record, we ask for your assistance with the following procedures. Please mute cell phones and electronic devices. The committee members may be using their cell phones for research information pertaining to this hearing. They also might come and go during the hearing if they have other duties requiring their attention. We will begin with the introducing senator's opening statement, followed by testifiers, and then the senator's closing remarks. If you intend to testify, please pick up a green sign-in sheet that is on the table at the back of the room. Please fill out the green sign-in sheet before you testify. Please print and complete the form in its entirety. When it is your turn to testify, give the sign-in sheet to a page or to the committee clerk. This will help us make a more accurate public record. If you are not testifying and you wish to record your attendance in the hearing, you may sign the white attendance sheet located on the table at the back of the room. If you have handouts, please make sure you have 12 copies and give them to the page when you come up to testify, and they will be distributed to the committee members. If you do not have enough copies, the page will make sufficient copies for you. Please move to the reserved chairs when you are ready to testify. These are the chairs in the front row. We will not be using the light system today, as each invited testifier has agreed to keep their testimony to between 5 to 10 minutes. Questions from the committee may follow a testifier's opening. No displays of support or opposition to a bill, vocal or otherwise, from the audience are allowed at a public hearing. Now we will move to the first testifier, and actually I'll give my opening right now. Good afternoon, members of the Education Committee. My name is Senator Dave Merman. I represent District 38 here in the Nebraska Legislature, and I'm privileged to serve as the chairman of this committee. Today, we're holding a hearing on 3 different legislative resolutions, LR147, 148, and 149. Upon completion of my opening statement, I will be reassuming the chair so that I may partake in asking questions of our invited testifiers. LR147 calls for an interim study relating to parental involvement in schools and to examine modifications for my bill, LB 374. LR148 calls for an interim study towards the use of elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds and the Launch Nebraska website. LR149 calls for an interim study relating to the promotion of social emotional learning for short, SEL for short. I thought it would be best to pair the hearings for these three together because they ultimately gave me motivation for proposing LB 374. As a precursor to my opening, I want to read into the record an exchange that took place between two Nebraska school administrators and a member of the media. During the legislative session this year, Mike Lucas, the superintendent of Westside High School, and one of his deputies, Kelsey Tapp, who is the director of elementary teaching and learning, were caught on a video discussing their plans to go around any effort by the legislature to make teaching items like critical race theory illegal. Kelsey Tapp surmised that the really cool thing about their new SEL social studies, ELA, and our counselors in the psychs, so now we do SEL curriculum. The person questioning her asked, does the SEL provide an opportunity to talk about not only equity, but also about privilege and systematic racism? Yeah, Kelsey Tapp replied gleamingly. Later, Kelsey Tapp discussed how Westside has a unit starting in 8th grade to talk about being change agents. She admits that the units are a little more progressive. She discusses the Westside Professional Development Series, which discusses having privilege and microaggressions. They discuss changing the labels for teaching tenets of critical race theory. When discussing their rebrand of CRT, she responds, you got to do what you got to do. We can't let a talking point stop us from doing what is important for kids. Their interviewer remarks, the kids come before satisfying the political whims of parents. Yeah, Kelsey Tapp replies, shaking her head. Mike Lucas, the superintendent of the school, says, legislators, they don't mess with Westside too much. And when we go down, and we'll have to play a lot of defense this session, but we're all pretty connected. What are they going to try? The interviewer asked. Lucas said, they'll try and divert public education money to school choice movements. They'll try and do away with SEL. But we will eviscerate all of those. There's a lot of things always going on behind the scenes, and some of the most powerful people in Nebraska live in our district. That has nothing to do with education, and so we can deploy them to help with our message. The interviewer asked, so in a crazy MAGA state, how do you eviscerate that stuff? Because on the state level, you guys are, Lucas responds, you get the private citizen who runs a large Nebraska bank in our school, and all the people that run the chamber who either did or have kids at Westside. And we give them the talking points that brings everybody back toward moderate. We're the only state that has a unicam, Lucas says. And so we have 49 state senators. And so we always have enough to filibuster whatever is going to be harmful to public education. I want to stress that this interview was recorded before I introduced any of the legislative resolutions we are discussing today. Last summer, a few colleagues joined me in calling for an inquiry into the promotion and injection of critical race theory into the professional development of teachers by the Nebraska State Department of Education. Naturally, when prescribed in the form of professional development, these discriminatory worldviews are making their way into classrooms across Nebraska. Since then, my office has documented all this material. I've spoken to teachers, administrators, and even the previous commissioner of the Nebraska Department of Education about this subject. When I asked then Commissioner Blomstead about what statutory authority the Department of Education had to cultivate materials like Launch Nebraska's Teaching and Learning in 2021 school year, instructional materials and instruction document. Then Commissioner Bloomstead told me that that's not a road we want to go down. He said this is a defense to ward off any kind of inquiry into these materials. Frankly, that was offensive and wrong. The legislature, the elected members of this body, accountable to the people of Nebraska, determine what the law is, not unelected bureaucrats at the Department of Education. This body has told the Department and the State Board of Education by passing law what subjects they are to adopt academic current standards for. For example, Chapter 79, Section 760.01 lays out the subjects: reading, writing, mathematics, science, social studies, financial literacy, education on the Holocaust, computer science, and technology. These content areas must be cultivated in a way that is to be measurably tested and must be reviewed every 7 years. The department was not asked or granted by the state statutes to create standards for things like sex education or social emotional learning, critical race theory, culturally relevant education, or to create programs like CSDS, Lead for Equity, which we'll go to in a moment. So with all this in mind, I have a lot of questions. I've given the members of the committee and our invited testifiers a packet of exhibits, screenshots for lessons and resources from classes offered by our state education department, showing the material I find inappropriate, objectionable, or not called for under the duties we have assigned to the Department of Education. First, an elementary look at the Department of Education's website shows the continued promotion of comprehensive sex education standards found on their HIV/AIDS education website. A brief outline of that page says, and I quote, "The updated NSES reflect advancements in research regarding sexual orientation, gender identity, social, racial, and reproductive justice, and the long-term consequences of stigma and discrimination," end quote. It goes without saying that reproductive, social, racial justice, and gender identity have little to do with HIV or AIDS education. Another resource for students found on the department's website includes a promotion of the Trevor Project. The Trevor Project brands themselves as an online crisis center for youth who are struggling with their identity. But again, an elementary look at this group shows that their resources are of little educational value. Their website even provides informational access in an effort to promote so-called gender-affirming care for youth. The first thing that pops up on the Trevor Project page after clicking the link for the department's website is a notification that tells a student how to escape the page to prevent a parent or a teacher from seeing them accessing the Trevor Project. There are several red flags with this, and it is not something our state government should be promoting for students under any circumstance. Under the previously mentioned Canvas course provided by the Department of Education, CSDS Lead for Equity, the lesson on providing culturally relevant teaching, the rebranded education of critical race theory, the department provides the 1619 project and a manifesto called Multiplication is for White People. This is completely out of bounds, destructive, and unhelpful to students, educators, and leaders in education alike. This isn't a new thing either. The Launch Nebraska website infamously linked to the Culturally Relevant Education Hub, which I discussed last summer. But they did more. the department created a page titled Instructional Materials and Instruction. Step 1B of this guidance discusses teaching tolerance and a link to the Southern Poverty Law Center's Learning for Justice page. Let's talk about a few topics the page proposes. Bringing Black Lives Matter into the classroom, parts 1 and 2. Why talk about whiteness? This magazine feature story explores why we can't talk about racism without understanding the social construction of whiteness. Dismantling racial caste. What is needed to end mass incarceration and eliminate racial caste in the United States? If that's not enough, then the guidance also provides an article from Ed Week titled 15 Classroom Resources for Discussing Racism, Policing, and Protest. All of this nonsense underpins exactly why I have sponsored legislation like LB 374. Parents need to be able to blow the whistle about inappropriate materials making their way into the classroom. This shouldn't be promoted by the Nebraska Department of Education. It shouldn't be taught under the name of SEL, CRT, or whatever acronym one might have to teach it. I believe this underscores the need to further collaborate with parents, students, teachers, administrators to find compromise. It underscores exactly why we need a Parents' Bill of Rights in Nebraska. I thank you, and I'm willing to take any questions now before resuming the chair to ask questions of our witnesses. Yes.
Hi, Senator Merman. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for your careful consideration in scheduling this hearing today. I know that I received a lot of inquiries from constituents in my district who wanted to weigh in on some of these important issues. And as it is your right, as chair, you decided to limit testimony to invited testifiers, which is sometimes happens in our interim study process. But can you maybe just help to explain for folks that are gathered here today or watching at home kind of what your thought process was in knowing what an issue this would be in terms of high public interest, and then also just perhaps provide the committee with a little bit of information about how you selected the invited testifiers?
Okay. Well, as you can tell by the full room we have and even the hallways, there is definitely interest in these subjects. And as far as the invited testifiers, I tried to get testifiers that were some on one side of the issue, maybe some a little more on the other side of the issue, and then some kind of in the middle. But administrators, well, of course, the Commissioner of Education, the incoming Commissioner of Education, or the President, I guess, President of the Commission, and then also teachers, administrators, and parents.
Okay. Senator Merman, have you had an opportunity to view social emotional learning tactics that are utilized in our schools?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and then could you maybe just talk a little bit more about what you saw that was concerning in that regard? Because I'm a parent of elementary school students here in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I've had a chance to see some of those techniques at our school, which I think are very uncontroversial and common sense. Like when a crowd of kids gets a little bit disruptive, they remind everybody to take a deep breath. Things of that nature, which I think we could all agree upon are important to classroom management and helping people have emotional intelligence. But was your experience different?
No, I think there are some good things in social and emotional learning curriculum. But there's also things that many parents and even teachers and administrators don't necessarily agree with. And so that's part of the reason I combined these ours is so that parents can work together with teachers and administrators to do what's best for our kids.
Sure. And then just to put a finer point on it though, in your observation of social emotional learning, what exactly was, excuse me, concerning to you?
Well, there
What
are
tactic?
still elements of critical race theory and comprehensive sex education in the social and emotional learning.
Okay, so you're just more generally concerned about those issues rather than having any specific observations that caused issues for you in Nebraska schools.
Well, those are specifically the things I'm concerned about in SEL. Now, there may be more things too, but that's why we're having this hearing and
Sure.
this discussion and why we want to have parents, teachers, and administrators all working together.
Well, absolutely. I think that we can all agree collaboration is a good thing, but have you had an opportunity to actually define critical race theory?
Yes, critical race theory would be a theory that our institutions in this country are based on racial discrimination and including education. So everything is viewed through a racial lens instead of a human, we're all human beings type lens.
Okay. My understanding is that's a legal theory that's typically regulated to graduate school courses or law school courses, but not really utilized in elementary or secondary education curriculum, and particularly in Nebraska. Would you disagree with that?
Yes, I would disagree.
Okay. So where were you finding?
Definitely, critical race theory definitely did start in higher education, but it is also moving into our elementary and secondary.
Okay, and then
now.
specific examples of that in Nebraska, if you have them available?
I think we'll see some specific, yeah, I think I mentioned some in my opening, and we'll see some more
Okay.
testimony today.
And this won't be a surprise to you, Senator, and I know we'll wrap it up, but you know, I asked some of these similar questions during LB 374 when I had the opportunity to do so in your close. But how would you propose that Nebraska educators teach about things like redlining or the Trail of Tears or the Holocaust or slavery without a discussion of race?
No, those issues definitely need to include a race element to that discussion. But we need to have a complete history, so we teach both the good and the bad. And of course, the important thing is how do we move forward? You know, how do we learn from the past so we don't repeat bad things that have happened in the past? And you know, not only in the United States, but all over the world, and just bad things that happen among people and people groups in general.
Right. I think that's fair, that in order to ensure we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, we have to have a clear-eyed view of our darkest chapters in our history and our proudest moments.
Sure.
I don't think there's any disagreement about that. Last question, Senator Merman. Did you have a chance to work with our learned counsel or other subject matter experts to see how some of the approaches reflected in your interim studies or in your pending legislative bills, proposals that have passed in our sister states that really bring a big government censorship approach to free expression and free thought from a viewpoint discrimination perspective? And those have been challenged in the courts and have been enjoined and or struck down. So have you done a legal analysis about whether or not, if your proposals move forward, that would risk liability for Nebraska?
Well, I'm always in consultation with legal counsel.
Yes, absolutely.
But with like recent decisions from our Supreme Court, you know, such things as affirmative action, It's a little been interpreted to be more of a blind, not so much, or it's not appropriate to discriminate against people because of color or ethnic background. We need to base decisions in education and business on ability and character, those types of things, rather than color
Yeah.
or ethnicity.
And I know that when Florida passed a similar measure and now it's being implemented, that implementation has generated a lot of recent headlines. Part of the curriculum changes there prompted things like learning materials that indicated that slavery was a benefit to African Americans. Do you agree with that?
Well, no, I mean, slavery's wrong. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But, hopefully we all benefit one way or another from our background. And I'm not saying specifically slavery, but, that's just like saying history. We have to benefit from history by not repeating it. So, no, hopefully we all benefit from our background, but I'm not talking about slavery.
Okay, thank you so much, Senator.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. And I will invite our first testifier, Commissioner Maher.
Good afternoon, Senator Merman and members of the Education Committee. My name is Brian Maher. That's M-A-H-E-R for the record. And I'm the newly appointed Commissioner of Education in Nebraska. I'm on the final day of my first month in this position. Needless to say, there's a great deal yet for me to learn, but I'm excited to take on the challenge of ensuring a quality education for all of Nebraska's kids. Before I get started, I want to say thank you. Thank you for all that you did during this last legislative session. I know it was a heavy lift, and education was right in the middle of that lift. So thank you for all you did for education. In my first full week on the job, I met with our State Board of Education to identify and to narrow my performance expectations going forward. They identified 5 tasks for me. 2 of them specifically were to develop an understanding of the internal operations of the Nebraska Department of Education, and secondly, to intentionally work to build relationships within the agency. That's with Nebraska Department of Education partners, with members of the State Board of Education, with legislators, with the governor, with school districts and school district personnel, and with our federal officials. Accomplishing these tasks will take a great deal of time, but I'm committed to evaluating the myriad of resources, the projects, the staffing, and the initiatives at our agency over the next several months. And doing that in partnership with the stakeholders in the education system and for the citizens of Nebraska. I had an opportunity to meet in a small group setting with Governor Pillen. And last week I had an opportunity to listen to the governor as he addressed more than 1,000 administrators from the state of Nebraska and some staff members in Kearney. I full-heartedly agree with our governor that we cannot leave any child behind, and that the work done in education is meaningful to our state and to our nation. One thing that I've witnessed in my first month on the job is a dedicated, hardworking team at the Department of Education. I've even described that as an aha for me in my first week, and I think that's an indictment on me and what I thought I might see versus what I actually have seen at the Department of Education. I'm lucky to have those folks work with me, support me, and to work shoulder to shoulder with them to address issues that need addressed in our state. I will work to make sure that our efforts are pointed in a direction that is good for our state and in a direction that will be supported by our duly elected State Board of Education. I know we have a lot of room to improve. I know we're not perfect. I'm aware of some of the issues of the past, and I'm getting a handle on the pressing issues facing Nebraska in general and Nebraska education specifically today. One example of such an issue, we have a lot of outdated information on our web pages. We need to improve the processes by which we review and vet resources that go onto our website and that get taken down from our website. Quite frankly, currently, it's quite easy to put individual opinions on our website. The threshold for providing content to the site must change. When I had spoken originally about a couple of the expectations from the board, I would tell you a third expectation from the board to me is that of improving communication, both internally and externally. If you're wondering, maybe saying, well, I've heard that before, how do we know that will happen? I can tell you that the board has given me a March 1 deadline to come up with a comprehensive communications plan. So by March 1, if you're wondering when will that happen. And if it doesn't happen by then, next year you might be sitting here going, you remember that guy that used to be our commissioner, Commissioner Maher? There definitely is an accountability for me in regards to communication. The needs and services provided by the state education agency have changed significantly over time as well. This means we need to evolve and ensure stakeholders, including the legislature, are engaged. Like the governor, I too had a chance to address most of the administrators, the state's administrators, last week. One topic I addressed was the board expectation that I evaluate existing communication strategies and provide feedback to the board. A cursory look at our current strategies shows significant opportunity to send information out to schools specifically and to stakeholders in general. What isn't so obvious, at least not to me yet, is how we are designed to take information in, just to listen to our schools and to our stakeholders. I believe addressing this one topic can and will improve, and it will improve our communication in a tremendous way. But I also believe it will help improve the direction of the Department of Education. Another important point that I think is significant to this conversation is our staff turnover. As I sit in front of you today, it's obvious that Nebraska has a change in the role of Commissioner of Education. What isn't so obvious is that we have had recent turnover in significant positions in the department. The position of academic officer and the position of director of accountability are two significant positions that have people like me, brand new to the position, sitting in those seats. I look forward to working with those folks and all folks at the Department of Education on setting the expectation for the department and for the students of Nebraska. Finally, I know we're here today to speak about three critical topics, three resolutions, and I will do my best to answer questions that exist in those areas. But I really want to emphasize what our future work will look like at the Department of Education in regards to teaching and learning. These 6 things will drive our work going forward. Reading by 3rd grade, math achievement in the middle school, career and technical education, reduction in chronic absenteeism, addressing systems-involved youth and their needs, and the teacher shortage and the teacher pipeline. Those things will drive what we are talking about today and into the future. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to me this afternoon, and I'll do my level best to answer questions that you may have for me.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Commissioner Maher? Senator Conrad?
Thank you so much, Chair Merman. Welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Very excited for your leadership in this important role. And if there's anything this committee can do to be helpful during your transition, just let us know. We'll be constructive and active partners, of course. But one thing I wanted to ask about was my friend Senator Merman happened to leave out in his opening that we also have longstanding state law, first developed in the 90s and updated over the last 30 years, that demands Nebraska develop multicultural education curriculums as well. And there's a pretty robust set of not only a legal framework, but then rules and regs and policies that the Nebraska Department of Education has also put together to help our local schools do just that. So how do you really see potential bans on or censorship when it comes to books or areas of history interfacing with our statutory requirement that we advance multicultural education in Nebraska?
Well, thanks for starting with an easy question.
You bet. I knew you could handle it.
Well, first of all, I think you stated very, very clearly and quite eloquently that there are statutes on the book that we have to take into consideration with the issues at hand here today. The second thing that I would tell you is that we will follow state law.
Of course.
That's something that we will definitely do. The third thing that I would say is I think there's a lot of information that we need to work on as a department, both in the office, but also in conjunction with our Board of Education, to make sure that not only are we in compliance with state statute, but also that we're doing right by students and families in the state of Nebraska, and that will be our mission.
Absolutely. And I don't expect for you to know this off the top of your head, but perhaps your staff might be able to help us follow up afterwards. Senator Merman spent a great deal of time kind of laying out his concerns with different links that were available on the Department of Education website. And I think any one of us who have managed websites know that once you put something up, it's almost out of date right after you put something up on the website. So it does take a continual cultivation to keep that information relevant and fresh. I'm also, full disclosure, about the least tech savvy person in the world, but do you have a sense, or perhaps NDE might know, kind of what things look like on the back end in terms of web analytics? Do we have a sense about how often, if at all, any of those links were accessed by people in Nebraska?
We do, and I don't have that information at the tip of my fingers, but I know we have that. I did get a briefing on that specifically. The other thing, as you were speaking, Senator, that comes up too is we can put something on the website, and if it has links to it, if you dig deep enough, we can really get into trouble. So we have to be mindful and careful of that as a department too. But back to your original question, we can certainly find that information and get it to the members of the committee.
Very good. And I know that when you are cultivating content for curriculum or even for websites, that I think, of course, we can all agree that if we engage in viewpoint discrimination, that raises significant academic freedom, free expression, and First Amendment concerns for both teachers and students. Is that a fair general assessment?
It's very fair.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I've got some. And these might appear a little bit like gotcha questions, but they're not that way at all. I realize that you weren't here when a lot of these things started, and appreciate you being here today. So I want to preface my questions that you are not the commissioner when SEL and CRT curriculum began. So some of these examples you may not be familiar with, but I think you'll recognize some of this stuff is entirely inappropriate to our state government to be promoting as resources for teachers. And to start with, I'd like to ask you about ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 funding. Of that amount, do you know how much was given to Nebraska in ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 funding?
I don't know off the top of my head, Senator, but we can certainly have that information to you quickly.
Okay. And I'd also like to know how much of that was spent on the launchnebraska.com website, and also how much of professional staff or working group time was spent on the Launch Nebraska website too. So, and then are you familiar with the conversation that NDE had with members of the legislature and then Governor Ricketts on any other elected statewide official about removing cultural responsive education hub from the website?
I'm not familiar with any of those conversations.
Okay, and then, so you're probably not aware that several months after that discussion, educators had the ability to get to the PDF talking about resisting right-wing attacks against critical race theory and calling teachers to political action within one click from that link.
No,
Okay.
Senator, if you maybe would just allow me to elaborate.
Sure.
I feel like I'm being evasive. That is, please don't take that as any disrespect, but
Sure.
I don't know that information.
No, I understand. That's why I prefaced it with it was before your time. So, and here's another one that you might have to get back to me on. Are you familiar with NDE's Adult and Social Emotional Learning webinar? The adult and social.
I am familiar with it, but I would say vaguely familiar.
You did you say you are?
I said vaguely familiar.
Vaguely, okay. Okay, a quote from that seminar: culturally responsive practitioners use the culture of the child as a foundation for teaching and learning. And then another quote says, Nebraska educators need to engage in professional developmental opportunities that focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that may sound nice in practice, but often it means discriminate, exclude, and indoctrinate. So any comments about that?
I would have this comment, general comment. It's not specific to that issue, but I think it's specific to how we move forward. And that is that I don't know how the course was set up. I don't know that. And I don't know the content. I wish I did, and I will quickly learn. But I want to set the course for processes in the future so that we have the voices that we need around the table in developing courses going forward. So I don't know that we can ever get away from having something be totally non-controversial, but hopefully we can develop a process that makes a lot of sense as we're developing content.
So that sounds great. I agree with you. The important thing is what we do going forward. So thank you very much. Got one more question here. I mentioned in my opening the Canvas class provided by NDE, CSDS Lead for Equity. Are you familiar with that at all?
Again, I would say vaguely.
Okay. Part of that is part of the resources in that are the 1619 project, and that includes the racist manifesto titled Multiplication is for White Kids. So just wanted to mention that. And it also references the Howard Zinn education curriculum. So Thank you very much. Better move on if anybody else has any questions. Yes, Senator Conrad.
Thank you so much, Chair Merman. I know you're a bit of a disadvantage being a new commissioner as we're kind of sorting or looking back through some of these controversial issues over the last couple of years. But let me take this opportunity to maybe glean more about what you do know as you transition into this role. When you were interviewing to take on this important and prestigious position, talking with our esteemed State Board of Education members and other stakeholders, what were the top issues in education in Nebraska that really bubbled up? I know I hear a lot about teacher shortage. I hear a lot about test scores. I hear a lot about resources, particularly for vulnerable students and rural students. Can you maybe help the committee understand what you think really the top issues in education might be at this point in Nebraska?
Yeah, I would like you to keep talking. I think you're nailing them. Yeah, I think.
Watch out, that's a dangerous invitation.
Well, I think one, duly noted. I think one of the things that really bubbled up during that process was assessment and accountability. How do we assess our students, and how do we make sure that they're growing at a rate that we would want them to grow in our state, and that they're growing with all groups, regardless of ability or disability, regardless of zip code, regardless of many things. So assessment and accountability would certainly be one of those things. The teacher shortage is a large topic that we're beginning. I don't even want to say beginning. I think they're beginning because I'm new, but I think our board and our staff and folks around the state have been working on this for a good long time. So I think I just come in to help breathe life into what is a real issue at this point. Certainly being under-resourced is something that I think we'll always hear, but our mantra on that is let's focus on the resources that we do have and make good use of those. To me, those are the folks in the districts, in the buildings, in the classrooms with our teachers, where the true magic happens in education, and then using not only our school districts, but our educational service units across the state, so that we're maximizing the resources that we do have, and we don't develop a woe is me attitude on those resources that we don't have. So that's certainly another issue. I think focusing on all students, as I kind of alluded to, regardless of zip code, regardless of ability or disability, I think is crucial to education in general, and Nebraska is no exception to that rule.
Right. In addition to advancing our values to ensure that all Nebraska kids succeed, it's also required under various aspects of state and federal law, for example, to ensure that we do not have educational disparities, to ensure that students who are differently able to have an ability to be included in classroom and educational opportunities. So thank you, Commissioner. I really appreciate your comments in regards to the top issues that are facing our educational system in Nebraska that I think are beyond the legislative resolutions that we're hearing today. But I look forward to continuing the conversation with you and other stakeholders on those very topics that will make a positive difference for all of our kids and all of our school districts across the state.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair.
Senator Breezy.
Thank you, Chairman Merman. Thank you for your testimony here today, Commissioner, and welcome to your new position, and wish you well in that, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Regarding the teacher shortage, most problems or many problems require a multi-pronged solution. Relative to the teacher shortage, I see it's possibly a question of money. What about B and C? What else should we be doing there?
That's such a good question. And first of all, I agree with your original premise. It's not just let's do this and that'll solve the problem. I think there are many things that we need to do. And certainly an elephant in the room is resources. But what other than that can we do? I love that question.
Or what shouldn't we be doing? One or the other.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
well, the first thing we need to do, all of us, and it starts with the commissioner, all of us need to make sure that we're not tearing down our own profession so that it looks appealing to students who are making that decision at some point in their, generally speaking, in their young lives as to what they want to do for the rest of their life. We want to make sure that we're not painting a poor picture and it looks like an appealing profession to be part of. The second thing is, I said this when I interviewed for the position, is I would like to peel away as many layers of the onion as I can that are barriers to quality classroom instruction and let the teachers do what they do best, and that's teach. If we can get out of our own way in the profession, I think that'll go a long way with making teaching more fun. And I put air quotes around fun because it's a profession first and foremost. But I think it can be very fulfilling. And we need to make sure that we create the for our professional staff to be fulfilled. That's really simplistic, but there are other things that I've done in my recent past that I think can help on that multifaceted issue. That's a great question.
Thank you for your insight.
Any other questions? I've got just one more. And the reason I bring this up, there's been a lot of discussion on comprehensive sex education in the last few years in our state. And I did mention in my opening that on the main website of the Department of Education, it has HIV/AIDS education, a website titled HIV/AIDS education. And it's still promoting national comprehensive sex education standards there. So are you aware of that?
I'm not, and you've got to be wondering, what have you been doing the last month? But that's something that certainly has captured my attention, and I promise you it won't be much longer before I'll know specifically what you're talking about.
Yeah, you've got a lot on your plate, and I've also got to apologize. I think we forgot to introduce Senator Albright. I think she is on the phone, and we're going to let her ask questions at last if she has any. So we'll give her that chance now. I haven't heard her on the phone. So.
Okay, I am here.
Oh, she is
Hello,
here.
everyone.
Hi, go ahead and introduce yourself, Senator Albright. Sorry about that.
No, not a problem. Senator Joni Albright, District 17, Wayne, Thurston, Dakota, and a portion of Dixon County. And welcome to your new position. And I went to school with some, but they didn't say it Maher. Is that how you say it, Maher?
That's the correct pronunciation.
Okay, well, that's wonderful.
That was a joke.
But I do appreciate you being here today. I'm certain that I would be delighted to have a conversation, just the two of us, probably off mic, to answer quite a few questions that I have that I would never put you through them all today. But truly, there is a lot going on. I do have a question. Do you do an exit interview with teachers that are leaving?
I don't believe we do that at the Department of Education, no, but I'm sure some of our local school districts do.
Well, it would be good to have an idea why all of a sudden. You know, I know some people say it's COVID, some people say it's the things that we're putting on, you know, the teachers for instruction that may very well not be comfortable with, you know, morally or ethically, having to push some of the subjects that we're certainly not part of what our state statute requires of our teachers and the education system. So that would be something I'd be curious about. And I know that it was heavy on our hearts this past year to do all that we could do to get teachers more engaged or students becoming teachers and trying to figure out what we could do. But we certainly want to respect those that have been there for many, many years. But I did have a few questions before, but I kind of wanted to save it to the end. So I just want to welcome you, and I'm excited to get to know you and learn a little bit more about what's important to you in the position that you hold today. So with that, I'll just be still and ask a few more questions toward the end. but I'm listening to everybody's introduction. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Senator. And I would say that I will be in contact with all members of the Education Committee, and I will try to come to your district and meet with you with your permission and get to know one another better than we do today.
Love to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Maher.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I will thank you very much, and I'll invite Mike Pate, the current Millard Public Schools Board member, to come forward.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Senator Merman and members of the Education Committee. Thank you for the opportunity for me to be here today to talk about specifically LR147. My name is Mike Pate, that's M-I-K-E-P-A-T-E, and I've been on the school board in Millard Public Schools for 27 years, going on 28 years, so I've been on quite a while. And people always ask me why I continue to be on the school board, and I say for one reason, it's because of the money. We don't get paid, by the way. I am here on behalf of the Nebraska Association for School Boards and Millard Public Schools. I've structured my testimony to answer the questions you provided prior to the hearing on LR147. You've also received a printed copy, which I just handed to the clerk, printed copy, but I will see that you also receive electronically later because it has web links to many of the resources and policies that I'll reference today in my testimony. In Millard, we have always valued the rights and contributions of parents. One of the district's belief statements in our strategic plans states that all schools are accountable to the community. To that end, we have significant processes outlined in policy to ensure that parents have access and input to the instructional materials their children will use. On the curriculum page of the Millard Public Schools website, parents and community members can access the framework, including the standards and indicators for each subject area. The website includes a complete listing of the instructional materials used for each elementary subject. We also include links in the handbooks for parents to understand how to review the materials and request exclusion. For our secondary families, the website includes a link to the entire middle and high school curriculum handbooks. Another one of our belief statements is that transparency builds and trust and confidence. As defined in the state statute, Millard Public Schools conducts an annual hearing where we accept public comments on our parental access, board policy, and rule. This policy and rule are reviewed and brought to the board for approval annually. We have board policy and rule in place to define how any parent or community member can review and challenge our instructional materials. There is a rule in the series specifically related to how parents may excuse their child from a book, unit, or course. Our entire library catalog for all schools is available online via the Millard Public Schools website. Parents can search for any book, review the offerings in the district at any school. We also define and rule our research procedures so parents and community members are aware of our assessments and surveys. The expectations and forms can be found on our website as well. The Millard Assessment Brochure, available in several languages, outlines each assessment, who participates in the assessment, and the purpose. Millard Policy 5740 and Rule 5740.1 define the processes for parents to visit school and observe in the classroom. In terms of how Millard complies when a parent requests to see instructional materials, small informal requests are handled at the building level. Teachers and principals meet with the parents and provide access to those materials. For larger, more formal requests, for example, if a parent wants to see all second grade social studies materials, the request is handled at the district level. The materials are assembled and the parent is invited to come review the materials for as long as they desire. In terms of how the state can support this work, we feel strongly that the laws currently in place address the issues. The more specific details of how to ensure parental involvement and access are defined by the locally elected school boards. Our and my concerns with LB 374 stem primarily from local control. Many, if not many, if not most of the measures outlined in the bill already are in place within our school district. As defined in current state law, we have a policy in Millard which outlines parental access to instructional materials, rights to monitor classes and activities, excusing a student from activities or portions of the curriculum, testing, and policy regarding student surveys. We also, in accordance with state law, conduct an annual public hearing to review these policies and seek public input. We have a board policy related to how parents can request a review of any instructional materials, including library books. Teachers are bound to a code of ethics that would prohibit them from behaviors outlined in Section 3, Subdivision 8 of the bill. Our concerns with this legislation are in no way related to the rights of parents. Our concerns are related in large part to the vague language that would pose implementation challenges. Adjectives such as excessive, related to profanity or violence, are vague and open to individual interpretation. Parental review recommended, as the term is defined as content the average person would find as inappropriate for minors, using contemporary community standards. Implementing the procedures as described would be challenging due to the vague nature of the language. The creation of an online parent transparency portal is both excessively cumbersome for teachers and costly for districts, as it is required to be updated weekly and monthly. Districts have policies now, as required by current law, that allow parents the opportunity to review any of the materials outlined in the bill. The requirement to include in the portal any training materials is especially challenging because of the breadth of the district training and the fact that individual buildings provide ongoing professional learning almost weekly for teachers. Maintaining the portal would require both extensive staff time and would have financial implications. It is also an unfunded mandate. I have a daughter who's a 5th grade teacher, and I asked her about this, and she said, we already have so much that we have to put in there. And she's got a website around her own, a calendar built in that includes a lot of the materials already in there. So she's doing all of that. But if you add to that, it'd just be burdensome. Again, we want to stress that we are fully in support of parents' rights and welcome their input and involvement. Current state law and district policies provide for this. Our concerns are with the vague and broad statements in the portal and the costs that will make implementation a challenge for any district. Thank you for your work to ensure that our Nebraska parents remain primary caregivers for their children. We believe that the current Nebraska law addresses this, and our locally elected school boards are in the best position to create policy needed to ensure implementation. Thank you, and with that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Pate. Any questions for Mr. Pate? Senator Conrad.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you so much, Mr. Pate,
You're welcome.
for reaffirming the existing legal landscape in Nebraska. And I know that came up in our hearing this winter as well. One thing that I was thinking about in preparation for this hearing was some of the discussions that I've had with my constituents, whether it was on the campaign trail or transitioning into the service role. And when North Lincoln neighbors ask me about, things that they see as controversial, that they're concerned about happening in our schools, I try and push past just kind of the hot button, divisive nature of our politics around some of these issues, and recognize that people who are concerned about these issues, at the heart of it, I think, are concerned about kids and want to make sure that they have a safe and healthy learning environment and a bright future, as we all do. So I don't know what they teach in all classrooms across the country or even across the state, but I have little kids at Lincoln Public Schools, so I'm pretty familiar with the curriculum and practices in one of our state's largest school districts. And, when I tell neighbors who are concerned that you have access to curriculum, if you want to learn more about it, you can opt your child out if it's not the right fit for your family for a variety of different reasons to respect parental rights. They usually say something like, wow, really? What are we fighting about? And I really take those experiences to heart, because I think it's a disservice to taxpayers and parents when we fail to neglect the existing structures that are in place to advance parental rights and educational transparency. I don't know if you'd have anything that you'd like to respond to in that regard, but I'm sure you have those same experiences and conversations as a longtime board member.
Yeah, yeah. We have a very active community in Millard, very active parental community. And I get a lot of emails, as you can imagine, on a lot of different subjects. But whenever there's an issue that comes up where they think that they're being ignored or that their child may be having some issues, I always recommend that they go through the proper channels, right? They have to go through the proper channels to solve the problem. School board members can only intervene if we really feel that it's not getting addressed properly. Over the last couple of years, we've had a lot of controversial issues surface to the top. And I can tell you our boardroom has been full several times talking about those controversies. But we all value their input, regardless of what the topic is. We value the parental input because that's important for us as policymakers, just as it is for you as policymakers as well. So, and I've never heard anybody say that they didn't have access to information or get a response on a timely basis. If they have, on a rare occasion, it gets addressed fairly quickly. So again, I think it's an operational procedural issue within a district. And I think if you're doing the right, just like any business, if you're doing it right, and you believe in what you're saying, you're not going to have the problems in doing that. But from time to time, you have to ask questions too, right? As board members, that's our job, is to ask questions because we do represent the community.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mr. Pate? Senator Breezy.
Thank you, Chairman Merman. Thank you, Mr. Pate, for your testimony here today. And thank you for your 27 years of service to
Thank
your
you.
local school. That's fantastic. Appreciate that. But to your knowledge then, neither the board nor administration during your time there has entertained concerns from parents or patrons regarding lack of accessibility or transparency relative to curriculum or courses or.
Yeah, I would not say never, but on occasion there'll be something that might come up, might surface to the top, but it gets addressed when it comes to the board's attention, it gets addressed fairly quickly.
Okay, and you're suggesting those are very rare instances.
They are rare. In Millard, they're very rare. And I would also tell you, just to kind of give you another example of how transparent Millard is, we've got a very active group of people, including the Nebraska Taxpayers for Freedom. And they have come out recently and most, the last couple of years and been very, very supportive of our budgeting process, of what we just did with our levy override process as well. And we're in full support of what we did because we gave them full access to the information that they requested so they could see very well exactly what we're doing and ask the questions appropriately. So that's not something they do often, but I think it just goes to the fact that what we do in Millard is offer the transparency to anybody that is interested in learning more.
Many other districts follow the same pattern as far as these issues, do you believe? Or, is Millard an outlier? Or
I don't think we're an outlier necessarily, but I think we stay in our lane. We try and focus on what's important in Millard, which is educating our kids, giving a return on the investment to our taxpayers as well. We stay in our lane. And I don't think we're an outlier, but I think we do a pretty good job of giving academic performance at a low cost of funds, or lowest cost to the taxpayers. So they're getting that return on the investment. And very supportive group. We've got a very supportive group. We've got different advisory groups that consist of parents, clergy, business, you name it. We ask for input from our community as well. So I think we do it right. And if there are other districts that are doing the same thing, and we'd like to share our successes if we have them. I think that's important within the education community is share your successes. Because I think if we're getting the results that everyone expects, why not share them?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? I do have one. And thank you for your years of dedicated service and also for coming in to testify, of course, today. And thank you for giving us this sheet of your testimony so I can refer to it. You mentioned many, if not most of the measures outlined in the bill are already in place now within our school district. As defined in current law, we have policy in Millard which outlines parental access to instructional materials, rights to monitor classes and activities. So you said as defined in current law. Do you know what statutes you're referring to?
I don't have the specific statute, but I do have copies, and we'll give you copies of all this too. Our parental access rule that we have here, and our public access school, the materials and documents as well, and then a curriculum request for exclusion as well.
Thank you.
And that is also in when you get this electronically, we'll send this to you electronically. It's on the links
Okay,
as well, so you'll have access to that,
okay.
those references as well.
Thank you very much. I
Yes,
appreciate
You're
it.
certainly welcome.
And should ask Senator Albright if she has any questions. I guess not. So,
I'll ask some questions
Nope.
later of you in a moment.
okay.
Okay.
If not, thank you very much
Okay,
for your
thank you.
testimony. And I will invite Lisa Wagner, President of the Central City Public School Board, to come forward.
I'm calling someone.
We're sorry, your call did not go through. Will you please hang up and try your call again? This is a recording. We're sorry, your call did not go through. Will you please hang up and try your call again? This is a recording. We're sorry, your call did not go through.
Guess we'll take a little break while this is going on.
They knew I was nervous.
Okay, good afternoon, Lisa.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me here today. My name is Lisa Wagner, Lisa-Wagner for the record. And I am the president of Central City Public School Board of Education. I was elected to the board in 2008, and I have been reelected to my community 4 consecutive times. I am here today to share my thoughts about LR147. In addition to being a school board president, I'm a farm wife and a proud parent of 2 sons. Before I was elected, I was a parent, an involved parent, I may say so. My boys were 12 and 9 when I first elected to the board. Now, both boys are graduates from our public school and successful adults making their lives and starting their careers here in Nebraska. One is in Omaha, the other one is on the staff at Fullerton Public Schools, coaching and working with special education students. Like me, most of Nebraska's 1,700 locally elected school board members are also parents. I can personally speak to my board in Central City, where all 6 of our members are parents. Involved parents, if I may say so. And like you, I have seen a lot of national news coverage about schools in other states that is genuinely concerning. I'm here to let you know that this is not the case, I feel, in Nebraska. We already have a state statute that requires Nebraska school districts to have a policy related to parental involvement. Nebraska schools are already committed to and actively soliciting input from parents. For example, in Central City, we strive for year-round parental involvement. We hold open houses, parent-teacher conferences, literacy night, annual policy hearing, surveys, communicate through final forms, and we have an email blast we call the Bison Alert, and the newspaper. We also have other policies that address library content and curriculum. We are always happy to produce textbooks, library materials, curriculum, and standards upon any request that parents have made. Because we know our community members, parents know school board members by name and how to contact us. Our curriculum rotation and selection of new materials focuses on the very concern of parents and what is being taught to our students. Our district stands by wanting to provide grade appropriate education that is free of bias and opinion, while focusing on character and ethics of all students. The district has established a 5-year curriculum rotation that includes the review of new text as necessary. We have a tremendous amount of trust in our staff and work well together in what we feel are the right choices for our district. In large part, because our existing parental engagement, we have had few, if any, complaints about our curriculum over the years. This is true of our school boards across the state. Despite a national rhetoric grouping all things public schools from Orlando to Oshkosh into the same pot, most of Nebraska school boards remain very traditional and concerned with teaching values, character, and ethics over some of the broader concerns that were in LB 374. In sum, we do not need additional mandates or legislation dealing with parental input. Instead, local school boards need to retain their current obligation to publicize their policies on parental involvement, and parents who have concerns need to raise them with their children's teachers, their administrators, and local school board members, the people who are parents themselves and who are fellow neighbors and community members. This is a local issue. What we do need is a stronger state focus supporting our public schools here in Nebraska and moving away from a more generalized national narrative. Let's work together to place an importance not just on more parental involvement, but involving more parents. Let's start the conversation about how to get parents who aren't engaged more engaged. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Lisa?
Thank you so much.
I've got
Oh,
one.
sorry.
Since you kind of ended with the question there about let's start how to get parents that aren't engaged more engaged, any ideas on that?
That's the number one question, isn't it, out there to get them? And we try our hardest, and it's hard. My daughter-in-law to be is a teacher also. And she says she tries so hard. And there's only so much you can do, and we just need to keep trying and come up with different ways. And that's what each district does, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Senator Albright, any questions?
I don't know that she's back on.
Okay.
She was.
Okay, Senator Sanders has a question.
Thank you, Senator Merman. I just wanted to thank you for coming to testify. This is a hearing, so we are open to hear what you have concerns of. So I want to thank you. It seems very emotional for you, but thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick follow-up?
Senator Conrad.
Thank you so much, Chair Merman, and just to echo my friend Senator Sanders' comments, we really appreciate you being here. And we know that Nebraskans who serve on their local school board sacrifice a lot because they care about kids and they care about their community and they care about teachers. And that passion is evident in your testimony here today. But, you know, one point that I really take away from the important information that you provided with us is something that I see a lot in our community and hear a lot from our local schools about as well, is that these claims that parents don't have rights or that parents can't be involved in schools just really don't ring true in terms of the reality for how our educational systems work. What I hear from teachers and leaders in our district is that they welcome parental involvement and in fact would like to have more, not less, in order to ensure that kids can succeed and that parents can have the support they need and teachers can have the support they need so that we have those strong connections throughout to advance our shared goals. But the other thing that I was hoping maybe you could just help tease out a little bit more clearly, which I was hearing in your testimony, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, is that are you finding when politicians wage these very divisive culture wars in the halls of power, on social media, and in our public schools, that it hurts our public schools?
Yes.
Okay,
Very much so.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And with that, I will invite Jackie Egan from the NAACP Lincoln, Nebraskans for Peace, Let's Talk Alliance, and the Lincoln Education Collaboration to testify.
Thank you so much. I just appreciate your allowing me and inviting me to give testimony. I am Jackie Egan, JACKIEEGAN. I'm speaking on behalf of a multiracial collaboration working to improve education as a civil right. This collaboration is made up of NAACP Lincoln Branch, Nebraskans for Peace, and Let's Talk Alliance, a spinoff from the OLLI Diversity Committee. Most of us are retired people from a variety of backgrounds, including teachers, a minister, and other professionals. I'm a retired social worker. This testimony will tell you a little about our collaboration and what it supports in the teaching of history in public schools. It will define and explain for the record some aspects of critical race theory in the hopes that you might clearly see that critical race theory is not taught in public schools. It will review our support for social emotional learning as an important aspect of education, especially in the post-pandemic times. Finally, it will state our reasons for thinking that the provisions of LB 374 or any similar bill are unwieldy, unnecessary, and duplicative. This committee should not advance LB 374 or any similar bill to the full legislature. First, our interracial collaboration strongly supports the freedom of public schools to teach a complete and accurate history of this state and of this country, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's important for us to know the truth about what happened, and it's important not to confuse a truthful history with a complex theory, which is not taught in K through 12. I wish to read the following definition of critical race theory into the record. Critical race theory definition and explanation. CRT is a legal theory taught and discussed in law schools and universities, rising from the foundation of legal realism in the 1920s and critical legal studies in the 1960s. CRT was proposed by minority law professors and lawyers who were seeing the limits and failures of incremental legal change in the advancement of minority economic and political rights in the 1970s. 4 key principles for CRT. 1, race is a social construct, not a biological construct. 2, material economic interests, you know, the money of parties, judges, elites, and institutions impact laws, regulations, codes, and cases. 3, racism is structural and fundamental within U.S. legal, political, educational, medical, and economic systems. And 4, chance exists within the law. It's not black and white. The same situation results in different outcomes depending on who's the lawyer, the jurors, and other parties involved. Critical race theory is not part of Nebraska K through 12 curriculum. It is not part of the general educational requirement. It is not part of the doctrine of the University of Nebraska system. Critical race theory is not the use of race in particular to distort the history and culture of the US or to teach racial dogma in a way that is damaging to young white children. Critical race theory is not the teaching of social studies in a way that questions the principles of democracy without justification. This material is taken from a course taught through OLLI, Critical Race Theory, its origins and applications. It was taught January 2022. For anyone's interested in learning more about critical race theory, our instructor then, Dr. Rutledge, recommends Critical Race Theory, an introduction, published in 2001 by Richard Delgado and Jean Stefancic. So that was 1, now here's 2. We support social emotional learning, which is really what everyone needs to know to become a good citizen and a good student. This means learning to effectively manage emotions, to be kind, to look for solutions to problems, to stand up to bullying, to behave appropriately, and to be able to listen to and understand someone else's point of view, especially a view that differs from one's own. I'd like to read this into the record. This is from CASEL, C-A-S-E-L, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. Social emotional learning is defined as, quote, the process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotion, to set and achieve positive goals, to feel and show empathy for others, to establish and maintain positive relationships, and to make responsible decisions, end quote. Third, regarding LB 374 and similar proposals, our collaboration wants parents to take an active role in their children's education. However, one parent or group of parents must not be able to veto what the children of other parents are allowed to learn. We also support teachers being able to decide the best way to teach their children, their students. And of course, teachers need to be well-trained and competent in their field of teaching. We think censorship is ineffective and serves no meaningful purpose. Students need to be able to choose from a broad spectrum of materials, even materials that could be offensive to somebody. Parents need to be available to talk with their children about what they are reading. Parents need to be available to children to talk with them about what they are learning. In conclusion, LB 374 or any similar bill should not leave committee. If passed into law, such a bill would further increase teacher workloads unnecessarily. It would also duplicate what is already being done under Nebraska statute in public schools across the state. I'm so pleased to have been able to speak with you, and I thank you again for allowing me.
Well, thank you very much for your testimony, Senator Breezy. Question?
Thank you, Chairman Merman, and thank you for your testimony here today. I've heard people earlier try to equate CRT with SEL, but it's your testimony that they're two separate and distinct and fairly unrelated concepts, correct? Am I understanding correctly?
That's
Okay,
correct.
very good. Thank you.
But when I function in racist ways towards someone, I need to learn social, emotional learning in order to not do that. So are they separate? Well, yeah, the definitions are different.
Okay.
But can I use the tools that I would learn in SEL to deal with my own shortcomings? Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I have one. You did reference a statute again late in your testimony.
You're going to ask
Do
me to
you
know
happen to
what.
know what that statute is?
Well, I'll defer to you, Senator Conrad. I don't know what statute.
Okay, thank you. And I just have a quote from Kathleen Rutledge. I think you're familiar with who she is. And I want to quote a little bit from there, what she says. She says, schools should not be teaching that people of any race, ethnicity, or national origin are inherently superior or inferior. Do you agree with that?
Of course.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate your testimony. Any other questions, including Senator Albright, if she's back on? Okay, thank you. And with that, I will ask Kirk Penner to come forward.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the opportunity here today. My name is Kirk Penner, Kirkpenner. I am the District 5 State Board of Education representative in Nebraska. I need to make it clear that I am not speaking on behalf of the State Board of Education. I also spent 16 years on the Aurora Public Schools Board. For me, this hearing is about ideology and who is influencing education in Nebraska. Ultimately, what I believe is that what we are really discussing today is what should be taught in our schools and who is allowed to decide what is being taught. So who really controls what is being taught in our schools? Many point to local school boards, but that is not the correct answer. What is being taught is crafted and decided long before it gets to our local school boards. Even if you had full transparency of the curriculum and know every sentence in the curriculum on every subject, you can still be infiltrated with teachings and classes that are supported by those who control what is being taught. So keeping with the question, who controls what is being taught in our schools and who is pushing that ideology on our kids? I just picked up, here are 5 examples of the influence by education groups. None of the 5 examples that I will give you would be found in any curriculum that you would have been able to review. No amount of transparency would expose it. No law from the legislature. Who influenced our educators and administrators that these examples should be in a school setting? So the question is, who decided? Who decided to include questions on surveys given to our children that included the question, some people describe themselves as transgender when their sex at birth does not match the way they think or feel about their gender. Are you transgender? That survey I just mentioned is given in Nebraska and approved by the Nebraska Department of Education and Department of Health and Human Services. Who decided it is a good idea to put porn into school libraries? Actually, the librarian in most schools have quite the power to do that, and they have little oversight unless they are caught. Who decided it was a good idea at a Nebraska school for the administrator to hide the transition of a student from the student's parents? Who decided it is a good idea at a Nebraska school to have sophomores be taught about their white privilege? Who decided it is a good idea at a Nebraska school to request that the teachers put their preferred pronouns on their doors? There it is. Who decided it is a good idea at a Nebraska school to not tell parents that one of their students was going to start using the restroom of her new chosen identity, meaning a girl was going to use the boys' bathroom and the parents of the boys were not informed. After spending 19 months on the State Board of Education, I could add many more. But again, my point is none of these 5 examples are found in any curriculum that would be available for a parent to see. None of them. So we talk about transparency and how we let the parents see everything, but it will never stop the nonsense until we stop the influence of these education groups or add consequences to teaching lessons not allowed. Even if there is a law in the books, we have a Nebraska superintendent on video admitting that he would break the law and then he got high fives from some of his staff. We need consequences. So I ask again, who decided? Who is influencing the decisions by local employees? I guarantee you it wasn't the parents. So to answer the question, who controls what is being taught, I call it big education, not any different than big pharma or big oil. That is who is deciding what is being taught and influencing our educators and having direct impact on our children. They are the answer to who decided. One easy example of how big education influences our classrooms comes to us from something as benign as a state statute written into law by our legislature to require a human relations course for educators and for those just wanting to substitute teach. Human relations, that's simple. You would think maybe discuss the ability to interact in a healthy manner with others. Wrong. The human relations course, which is required, is a leftist course of propaganda. Here is Peru State College's version of human relations. The class title is Diversity in Education. The required reading comes under 2 headings. One heading is White Privilege and Critical Race Theory, with a list of 5 links that discuss the topic. The second heading is LGBTQ+ and Gender Spectrum, with a list of 6 links that discuss the topic. The questions on the final exam were, explain the use and importance of using proper pronouns. It's a learning curve when you first start changing your use of pronouns. How will you adapt to it if you have not done so already? How will you correct yourself if you make mistakes? And what are some examples of LGBTQ curriculum, which I didn't know existed, and that's my personal thought, and how can it be used in the classroom? So they took a legitimate class and took it as far left as you can. That is what is happening with social emotional learning. Big education can't help themselves. It's like an addiction. They must plug their politics into every aspect of education. In order to understand what is happening with SEL, you must understand who the supporters are. First, locally, if you want to get a feel for who supports SEL in Nebraska, today after this meeting, the most liberal senators in this state are holding a get-together that will embrace SEL and its teachings. Nationally, the key supporters are the following, just a few. National Education Association. Here's a little flavor of what they believe. Last year, the NEA adopted new business item 34 that supports abortion and encourages teachers to participate in activities and rallies and demonstrations. New business item 63, which fortunately did not come up for a vote, but wanted to change mother to birthing parent and father to non-birthing parent. And believe me, you're going to get a firsthand look at NEA and its sister, the Nebraska State Education, this summer, and as they will pour millions of dollars into Nebraska in the next year to prevent children at or below the poverty level to get out of a school that is not working for them and take their scholarship to a school that will. Another supporter, Southern Poverty Law Center. You don't get more liberal than SPLC. They love to call parents involved in their children's education hate groups and bigoted. Groups like Moms for Liberty or our own Nebraska-led Protect Nebraska Children are labeled hate groups by SPLC. Planned Parenthood, big supporter and proud provider of transgender and non-binary hormones. The Fetzer Institute, the founder is John Fetzer. Fetzer was a devout follower of occultist Alice Bailey. Bailey is known as the mother of the New Age movement and founder of the Lucis Publishing Company, originally named the Lucifer Publishing Company. The New Age religion teaches you can become a god. Jesus was just a man, and it contains aspects of cosmology, astrology, and esotericism. SEL is championed by the most liberal senators in this state and some of the most liberal organizations in America. Why? because SEL contains liberal ideology. The faster you understand that these large national groups are not about the kids and are about ideology, power, and money, the sooner you will come to the conclusion that we need to get rid of SEL. So what exactly is SEL? According to SEL expert Jennifer McWilliams, it is an ideology. In 2019, Jennifer was working as a reading intervention instructor when she became very concerned about the education transformation unfolding at her school and across the nation. As she began to research what was causing the shift in focus from academics to ideology, she learned about the driving force behind the change, social emotional learning. In September 2019, she started to inform parents and citizens about the concerning changes in education. 6 months later, February of 2020, Jennifer was fired for exposing SEL program at her school. According to Ms. McWilliams, social emotional learning uses framework that is a culturally responsive framework. And culturally responsive teaching is a term coined by a self-proclaimed critical race theorist, Gloria Ladson-Billings. Culturally responsive teaching is the manipulation of children to see our country and all our systems as oppressive, and that it influences them to believe that they need to work to dismantle the systems and create new social norms. The framework of the SEL has 5 competencies or skills that they aim to teach children. Those skills are self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. Those skills are all skills that sound nice, and they are skills that as children grow and develop that they need to learn and that their parents teach their children. However, when the school teaches them through social emotional learning, they're teaching them through a view of a critical race theorist. So the idea behind these competencies are that the self-awareness and self-management have a heavy focus on the younger grades, kindergarten through 12th grade. So the elementary grades focus on identities. So right now we see a lot of books in the younger grades especially that focus on gender identity and using preferred pronouns, and that is because the focus of self-awareness and self-management is to get children to understand where they fall on the hierarchy that the critical race theorists believe our country operates on. Big education and the radical agendas of SEL and CRT and gender fluidity is driving the bus of school choice, and they either don't care or don't understand. If we continue to push radical ideologies on our children at our public schools, the school choice movement will continue to gain momentum. We can do so much in this state. We can improve our test scores and invest in career and technical education, but we are getting in our own way. We are stopping ourselves from being the best we can be in education. We need to get back to the basics. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Penner. Any questions for Mr. Penner? Senator Breezy.
Thank you, Chairman Merritt. Thank you, Mr. Penner,
Thank
for
you.
being here. Appreciate your testimony. So contrary to one of the previous testifiers, you tend to equate SEL with CRT or find them very similar.
It's the avenue to bring it in.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the avenue to bring it in without calling it.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Conrad.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much, Mr. Penner, for being here. And just follow up on my friend Senator Breezy's question. So an example that I'm familiar with as a parent in my kids' schools regarding the practice of social emotional learning is like when the assembly gets a little bit rowdy, the teachers may ask the students to take a deep breath and kind of calm down. So are you familiar with that tactic in social emotional learning?
We've been doing that for decades.
Yes, that's right. And I think it's probably a good reminder to everybody to take a deep breath, including in instances like that. But just to follow up on your Q&A with Senator Breezy, how on earth does that open the door to critical race theory?
It allows the SEL allows them to bring that in through teachings. And the way they do this is, and there's examples of it. One example is the porn in the libraries, and we're seeing a lot of porn in libraries. You and I both know there are porn in our school libraries.
I don't know that now.
Oh, well,
Okay.
there is.
Please don't put words in my mouth, but I appreciate your opportunity to respond. My question, though, was you agree we have utilized social emotional learning like de-escalation and emotional intelligence and taking a pause for decades. And that has not acted as a gateway to these other things that you're now saying that you're concerned about. So how, in fact, do de-escalation tactics open the door to teaching a graduate level theory in our elementary schools? I'm trying to follow the logic
So
there.
the logic and even what Ms. McWilliams is saying, that part of.
I'm asking you what you're saying.
Well, what I'm saying is I'm seeing it with the porn in the libraries, and you're saying you're not seeing porn in your school libraries.
I'm not, no.
Okay, you're not. I'm also seeing it with Four Corners, which is a game they play to help kids learn how to identify themselves. So there's different ways through SEL, and SEL is also being brought through all the curriculum. You're not going to be able to determine all the curriculum written now, and I think one of the speakers said it, is SEL loaded. So they're writing curriculum with SEL embedded in it. So it really comes down to what we want to teach our kids, and that's my opening sentence. What do we want to teach our kids? You're going to have an opinion on what you want to teach your kids. I'm going to have an opinion on what we want to teach our kids, and that is the discussion that is happening today.
Right, and existing Nebraska law appropriately centers parental rights in regards to what their children access in terms of education. And if the existing curriculum is not right for you or your family, you have an opportunity to opt out of that. Is that correct?
That is correct. But
Okay.
I'm not talking about the curriculum. There's other ways.
Isn't that the point of this interim study?
Yes, but my whole point was that you can get through it without even having curriculum as a part. It was my opening statement here, that you can bring in some of the stuff and not have it written in a textbook or an iPad. That's how you can do it.
So your concern would then, and your request for consequences would be that we, surveil every teacher and every comment that happens in public schools? Or how exactly would you go about understanding the information that you're seeking that you talk about in your testimony?
Right. So that's the question. Who decides what we teach in our public schools and what we are going to teach in our public schools? That's just a larger question.
Sure. And we know the answers to that, right? It's state law, it's state school board, it's local school board, and it's parents.
Well, who's teaching the school teachers?
Right. And they carry out and implement the decisions that we make on the state and local level in regards to curriculum.
Right.
Right. Okay. Very good. We can agree on that part. Okay. Mr. Penner, I did want to give you an opportunity to perhaps clarify some of the comments that you made in your opening statement. I think it's a disservice to call librarians in our state pornographers. I think librarians are carefully trained to assist faculty members and students in having opportunities to pursue the joy of reading or academic research. I also know that librarians do not solely make decisions about what is on the shelves in our school libraries, but most schools have a fairly arduous process in place to ensure that community standards are met. Would you like an opportunity to apologize to the librarians of Nebraska for associating them with pornographers?
Yeah, I didn't call them pornographers.
We'll let the record reflect that and maybe go back and check the tape.
Yeah.
But I do think that association was made in your testimony. So if you'd like to clarify that, I wanted to give you the opportunity to do so.
Can I tell you what I know as a school board member?
Sure.
Most
I thought
likely-
you were here in your personal capacity, but okay.
But that's my personal life in the past.
Okay.
Is that librarians have quite a bit of authority and to place books in their library. It's just a fact in the state. Librarians have a lot of things. So you have school libraries that look totally different from one district to the other, because librarians, especially in rural Nebraska, have a lot of leeway because there's not the oversight. So that is just a fact.
Okay, so let's just tease this out for another example, perhaps. So let's say a parent's faith tradition doesn't believe in evolution. Should we remove all library materials in relation to evolution from our school library shelves because that doesn't meet some families' kind of faith traditions?
Right. So we're talking about evolution, which has been taught in schools for
right?
30 years. And so we're talking about specific, explicit books and libraries that we can all agree.
Okay, so if you find materials in a school library that don't match your religious beliefs or your family's beliefs, you are not forced to check them out. You're aware of that, right?
Right.
Okay, and if your children were to bring those home, you can have a conversation. I understand with many schools, parents really do get to be involved in that process under existing law. Okay.
But if they're bringing porn in home from their school, then that needs to not happen.
Can you give me a specific example of a child bringing porn home from a Nebraska school?
I can give you a list. I'll send it to you. I'll give you a list of all questionable books in every library in the state that the list has been compiled. I'm happy to get that to you.
Okay, I appreciate that follow-up. Mr. Penner, you talked a lot using a term that I had not heard before called quote unquote big education. And you were talking about how this is really like a profit-driven motive and comparing it to things like big tech or big pharma. Do you know many teachers that go into teaching for the money?
I'm not talking about the teachers. I'm talking
Okay,
about
I'm
talking about the large organizations outside education, and I listed some of them that are supporting SEL. I'm not talking about the teachers.
Okay, but you do understand that whether it's the NEA or the NSEA, that is comprised of teachers.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
okay. And so your disagreement is with the fact that teachers have a right to collectively bargain?
No.
So your disagreement is with the fact that teachers have a right to petition their government and engage in the political process?
No.
Then why would you make claims that teachers are part of quote unquote big education with a profit motive?
Because they have ulterior motives, that they are bringing other things into public schools that do not belong in public schools. And they have a large budget. They're going to spend a lot of money in this state coming up to get rid of the opportunity scholarships. And so they're operating to have money in order to defeat a school choice bill. And they're going to do that in Nebraska all of next year. And so I'm just saying what you have is you have a lot of teachers out there that most teachers want to do good, but the influence from outside entities is telling them what they have to teach. And I would argue, or I would suggest, that you have teachers that are leaving the profession, not only because of discipline issues, not only because maybe they're not getting support from administrators, but what they're having to teach our children. And that's why we're having some issues. Those are three big ones. The biggest issue in the state, if you talk to Dr. Maher, is probably the teacher shortage.
I agree.
And we're going to do everything we can to address it. But we can do some great things in this state if we just get back to agriculture and everything, not just ag, but we are the number 2 industry is manufacturing. Look what we can do in this state.
No, I agree. And I think there's always opportunities for common ground. And the legislature took some really important strides forward in addressing teacher shortage. I know she's not here today, but Senator Linehan carried a lot of those bills, which were really important. But that opens up, I think, an important point there, Mr. Penner. I'm not a big social media person, so I don't spend a lot of time on that forum, but I understand that you do. And if you agree that teacher shortage is one of the top issues in Nebraska, about how often do you tweet about that?
I would have no idea.
Okay. About how often do you tweet about social emotional learning?
Quite a bit.
How often do you tweet about critical race theory?
That not as much as the SEL, but that brings in the CRT.
Okay, so you've spent most of your free speech opportunities and rights, which you have, as do other people, everybody in a diverse democracy. So you've chose to focus on divisive social topics rather than real issues that you agree are really the top of the educational concerns that we have in Nebraska.
I cover the social issues because I think they're game changers. And if we continue to go down the path we're going, we're going to have some issues 10, 15 years down the road. So I think it does attach itself to education. So absolutely.
Okay.
I spent a good 3 months working on Bill 603 to bring the first ever money from the state to career and technical education. So I'm not just one-sided. I spend a lot of
Great
time
issue.
doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, from your experiences as a parent or on the local school board, now on the state level, would you acknowledge that there are educational disparities that we have in Nebraska in terms of test scores, education outcome, things of that nature that do demonstrate there are racial disparities in terms of academic performance that exist in
I
Nebraska?
think we spend a lot of time trying to get every kid, no matter race, color, the decision, the quote that Mr. Senator Merman wrote is my theory, that we shouldn't be treating kids differently no matter what. But there is, and we need to address that issue. And we spend time on the State Board of Education addressing the academic scores in certain parts of the state. And there's one, yeah. So we're addressing one school system right now that's been on the naughty list for quite some time, and we need to get them out of it.
Right, because when we see that certain students or certain schools are struggling, we need to use that data to make a course correction so that those students in those schools have an opportunity to succeed. I think there's no disagreement about that. I guess I wanted to also ask you, in preparation for the hearing, and I know that you're primarily concerned about social emotional learning, some of the meta studies that have been done by academics, and these are studies of studies, right?
Okay.
That are looking, and that they show that social emotional learning has significant statistical improvements in pro-social behavior to help students have better behavior in the classroom, which I know that you're concerned about, that they have significant improvements in academic performance in relation to math and reading and standardized tests, and a significant decrease in behavioral problems and emotional distress. So if we want to address behavior in classroom and teacher shortage, we have proven strategies to advance pro-social behaviors and increase performance in academic areas. So I'm asking you, do you have information available or sources that undercut this meta-analysis?
I've not seen your meta-analysis, so I'd have to look at it.
Do you have any knowledge of any academic studies which show that social emotional learning hinders academic performance?
I have not seen any of that.
Okay. That's very helpful, I think. And then finally, Mr. Penner, you said that there needs to be consequences for educational leaders or teachers who, I guess, are engaging in, I don't know, free speech rights, or exactly what your quarrel is. But what kind of consequences are you talking about?
You know, a lot of times, and other states do it, that if a school is doing something that the state board or the legislature, and on a side note, we do a lot on the State Board of Education that isn't allowed by statute, let alone we don't do things that we're supposed to do in statute. So there's a lot of things that we can do in education that we haven't done, and there's some statutes in there that we need to revisit. I hope to do that with Dr. Maher, that there are things written in statute that we are not doing right now, and it is the law. So we need to do that. And I lost your question, but what are other states are doing? And sometimes they will get a warning, or they have, in some states, they talk about accreditation consequences. So it just depends on the state.
So if basically you're saying that if a teacher or administrator says something that you disagree with, you want there to be accreditation or funding consequences?
No, there's a large list. I'm going to go down and I'm going to visit some state board representatives in some other states and just kind of look at some of their programs that they're doing to see how it works. I think everybody in the legislature likes to be held accountable. I like to be held accountable. I think the schools are held accountable too, because they're test scores and everything, but we need to be accountable for what we're teaching our kids. And that's just one avenue. I don't know the right way, or if it's even the right way, but that is what we can do because if you do something wrong and nothing happens, what are you learning? Same thing with my kids and your kids.
Sure. And I'll wrap it up, I promise. But I did just want to ask Mr. Penner, and it might be helpful for the record because there were so many of my constituents and other citizens and taxpayers across the state that really wanted a chance to weigh in today and were denied that opportunity. But I understand the chair's decision to invite subject matter experts so the committee can get some technical information. But you said you're here in your personal capacity. Why are you here in your personal capacity and other taxpayers are denied that opportunity?
I am not allowed to, and given guidance from our lawyers, that when I come and speak at the legislature, unless I have full approval from my board, which I wouldn't get on this issue, I can only speak for myself.
Okay, and on that point, Mr. Penner, I understand that you've spent a lot of time and energy in your social media discussions talking about waging a political campaign to take over school boards and state board of educations to advance these kind of big government censorship ideas when it comes to discussions of sex or race or history. So I just want to make sure that the record is clear because that information is, of course, not available on the record. So you're here in a personal capacity, you're waging a political campaign, which is your right 100% to do. I welcome civic engagement from all perspectives. But I do want to make clear that is part of your agenda that you're putting forward and not divorce that from your testimony here today under the guise of purely a citizen. If you'd like to push back on that or disagree, please do.
That's your First Amendment right to speak.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've got a question. I know you're here on your personal capacity, but was there ever a situation with the Aurora Public School Board that you rejected curriculum because of its content?
No.
Okay. So I think transparency is a big part of the problem here. I think if parents knew a lot of more about what the curriculum is, it could be made better. Do you have a suggestion maybe of how the State Board of Education could get involved to do something like that, or to make a guideline for the legislature to support them with?
Well, the State Board of Education, we do policy and budget, and we hire and fire the guy behind me, is what we do. So that's our three aspects. So from the State Board of Education aspect, the only thing we could do would be to write in policy that, hey, you can't teach X, or you should teach this. And what I would like to see on the State Board of Education is pull back and do only what we are allowed to by statute. And let's try that. And there's a lot of things that the health standards came out. We weren't allowed to write health standards. It wasn't in statute that we were allowed to write those health standards. But we came back after ad hoc committee, and the ad hoc committee decided that we're going to write standards for all content areas. Well, we don't have the authority to do that. We grant our authority, or get our authority, from the legislature. You tell us basically what to do and what we can't do in statute. And that's what we need to get back to. And if we would stick to that, stick to what we're required to do by law and not what we want to do, I think we could make some great progress. And I hope Dr. Maher would see it the same way.
Thank you. Any other questions, Senator Albright or anyone else? Well, thank you very much for your testimony. And we're going to take about a 10-minute break now, possibly less than that, because I want to hear all the testimony. 9-minute break.
Do you have all right on the line?
Hi, how you doing? Good to see you. That's an easy one. Yeah. Okay, hi.
I have an extra copy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Great minutes, so I'll invite Lisa Schoenhoff, and she's an English language learning educator from Bennington Public Schools.
Thanks for having me.
Good afternoon.
Okay, back on.
First off, I just want to say thanks so much for all the work you do and for having me. It's an honor to be here. My name is Lisa Schoenhoff, and Schoenhoff is spelled Schonhoff. I have been a teacher for more than 20 years. I have 3 degrees in education. My undergrad is in Education 1.9 with a social science minor. I have a master's degree in curriculum and instruction with an ESL emphasis, which is English as a second language. I also have a specialist degree in urban leadership and administration. I began my teaching career in Asia, teaching English as a second language. From then, I have been a first grade teacher, a third grade teacher, an instructional coach for literacy and math, all in priority schools in inner city, Kansas City, Kansas. I'm an instructor, or have been an instructor for several college courses for teachers, a beginning teacher mentor, and a K-12 EL teacher and coordinator. Before I speak about SEL, I want to clarify that I'm not against social and emotional learning. I am, however, concerned about the CASEL framework that is being pushed down by the World Economic Forum. I am concerned about content that is included in the second step curriculum materials that many districts across our state are using. One example is in the second step curriculum materials in the 7th grade, Unit 2. The lesson it's lesson 9, and the objective is for students to distinguish between sexual harassment and flirting. Students are taught that with sexual harassment, you feel unsafe and the intention is unwelcome if you did not say yes to the behavior. With flirting, it makes you feel okay or even happy. And it's okay as long as you are comfortable with it. Okay? Kids are taught that there are 2 of the following 5 things that are not okay, or that are okay, and 3 that are not okay. 1, it is okay to be asked if you want to hold hands or have a hug, and receiving a romantic text message that makes you smile. Those are things that are okay. The ones that are not okay, sexual comments that make you feel uncomfortable, being sent sexual pictures you didn't ask for, and being touched in a sexual way without consent, without your consent. Okay? So the reason why this is concerning to me is that I have a son that is a 7th grade student, and I forgot to say that. I have 4 kids in public schools as well. Okay? My 7th grade son, learning about inappropriate consenting is a concern of mine when he's being taught about it from someone who is or is not qualified to teach it as an educator. I can wholeheartedly say that even with my over 20 years of experience as a teacher and my several degrees that I have in education, I am not qualified or have any desire to teach my students that consent is okay if it feels appropriate to them. I am also concerned that since the second step updates their materials every June, that means that parents and teachers have to review everything every single year because there are updates that come into effect every year. Now, they can also update the materials throughout the school year without teachers and parents knowing, as long as it's not the direct lessons that are supposed to be taught. Okay, so that's probably one of my biggest concerns. So that we teach the kids this content and then afterwards we give them a survey. These surveys are supposed to determine future needs. Well, if I'm teaching a child about consenting and not consenting, and then I give them a survey, this may indicate that we really need extra or additional funding from the federal government to continue to do these types of things in our school or to teach these types of things. So those are concerns that I have. Another concern that I have is where our district administrators across the state are getting pressure to have social activists come in and train teachers. Now, an example is the organization called Equity Nerd that's being invited in across our state. When someone comes in to train a district full of educators with a t-shirt that says "Smash the Patriarchy," I have concerns that we're putting political, I think it was called, we're instilling culture wars where culture wars should not be. We do absolutely have a mental health crisis in our state that needs addressed. We have approximately 30% of our students in Nebraska at proficient levels in reading and math. At one point in time, we built prisons based on third grade literacy levels. We have 1 in 5 children struggling with dyslexia. We need to get rid of all these distractions and we've got to get our kids to read, because if we don't have kids that are reading, the crisis will continue to grow and get worse. As an experienced educator, I can say with confidence that some of these things that are being taught in these specific SEL curriculum materials is not necessary to get our kids where they need to be. I think that's all I've got at this point. I will say there are other states that are banning, say, or getting rid of their contracts with panorama education surveys in states like Wyoming, because they're finding that these surveys that kids are taking are actually more detrimental to the well-being of the students. So with that, those are my biggest concerns that I have.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions? Yes, Senator Conrad.
Thank you so much. And I know you have a special lens as a parent, and I bring that to the table as well. And I think the heart of a lot of these discussions is definitely a common ground that we as parents want the best for our kids, and that includes good schools. Yes. It was a small part in your overall testimony, which I appreciate you being here and providing, but you indicated that you were particularly worried that somebody was wearing a t-shirt that said "Smash the Patriarchy." So patriarchy is defined as a system where men hold all of the power and women are powerless. And you find that disagreeable?
I think that's bringing in a culture war where it's not needed. I think that I've heard you mention culture war a couple different times today. Right. And I think our number one priority when training teachers needs to be on what's best for kids. And so when we go into a whole room of educators with a shirt that says "Smash the Patriarchy," that's bringing in a culture war where it is not necessary.
So again, my question is though so do you support a patriarchal society?
That's not
no,
the
that's my
question
question,
that I'm
because
answering.
if you're concerned that that's a problematic statement, my question is, do you support a patriarchal system in society?
What I support is not necessary in this, because what I'm talking about is SEL and presenting to a room full of educators.
And you're concerned that a presenter's t-shirt which has a message on it that you don't disagree with.
It's not, that has nothing to do with what I'm speaking on today.
But you included that in your testimony.
I'm telling you that I don't think it's appropriate to bring in culture wars like you had mentioned earlier where they're not appropriate, and that's bringing in a culture war.
How is
So
it
I
a
am
cul-
not okay with that.
How is it okay? How is it a culture war to ensure equality amongst men and women?
Saying taglines like "smash the patriarchy" is not appropriate in our schools.
So you're saying that presenters don't have free speech rights in terms of the shirts that they wear?
I say sparking controversy where it's not necessary is a concern I have.
Okay, I'll agree with you on that. And that's my main concern about these hearings,
Yeah.
actually,
Yes.
is because I think it does a disservice to the really important issues facing our kids and our students and our teachers and our
100%.
communities when we're spending time and energy having this debate, right? Because
100%.
we're not talking about test scores. We're not talking about teacher shortage. We're talking
should be.
about, we absolutely
You are
should be.
correct.
And, you know, it's the prerogative of the chair to set hearings and select how they're going to be conducted. And I respect my friend Senator Merman's decision for highlighting these issues. And I understand his decision, I guess, to limit testimony, but I really want the record to be clear about what's happening when we focus on these divisive social issues.
100%. That was
When
my
we-
whole point.
When we
Yes.
spend this time and energy here, we're not talking about real issues impacting real families. And we've got a dueling hearing happening down the hallway. And the noise is so high and the issues are so hot, it's not an accident. We're talking about things that are dividing us instead of talking about things that bring us together.
I think you asking me about my opinions on patriarchy was very divisive.
Well, ma'am, when you come to testify before the
I know,
legislature
I
and you share
understand this.
information, I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand your perspective. You
My
mentioned that
perspective,
a perspective was objectionable to you. I was trying to understand why it would be objectionable to you to challenge a system where men and women were not treated equally.
yes, I thought I was making that clear, that using your words, that culture wars, bringing in culture wars to our schools is not acceptable.
How is it a culture war to ensure equality amongst men and women?
Wearing a shirt that says "smash the patriarchy" is a culture war tagline, in my opinion.
Okay. And again, if you just look at the dictionary definition of patriarchy, it's a system where women are powerless.
Yes.
And so I think we probably actually have a lot of
I'm-
common
I'm
ground in
sure we
ensuring
do.
gender equity,
Yes,
right?
I'm 100% sure that we
Okay.
probably do.
All right,
Thank you for
very
your
good.
question.
And thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions?
Any other questions? Including Senator Albright. If not, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
And next, we'll ask Dr. Sue Greenwald to come forward with Protect Nebraska Children Coalition.
I have a lot of handouts.
Thank you for convening this. Senators, my name is Sue Greenwald. I'm here representing Protect Nebraska Children Coalition. Parents and teachers love their neighborhood schools. They don't want to be at war over library books or student surveys or opaque online curriculums. This battle is being pushed by a national and global agenda. The money coming from the government, nonprofits, and the unions has corrupted the system to the point where it has become an education and data collection cartel. Today, there is so much that happens in schools that is not done by the districts. The districts have become wholesale brokers, purchasing contracts with private third-party vendors for curriculum, for teacher in-service, for mental health, and for SEL. Since the teachers' unions have a large influence, the preferred vendors are nearly 100% politically left. Third-party vendors are also completely unaccountable to any laws that protect the welfare and privacy of students. Laws like the PPRA and FERPA only apply to entities which receive funds from the U.S. Department of Education. This explains why your students' transcripts are protected like Fort Knox, but their social studies test can ask them to choose a pronoun. The COVID relief or ESSER funds took hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars and handed them out to schools with a requirement that 20% be spent on approved social emotional learning or other critical race and gender theory-based curriculum. Superintendents sometimes got kickbacks in the form of board and consulting positions when they successfully usher in these curriculums. Money comes from grants and tax funds on a per pupil basis. Parents are the one part of this equation that are not a profit center, and they are irrelevant to the educational enterprise and are treated as such. Teachers are also expendable if they aren't willing to follow the preferred narrative. Concerned parents were designated domestic terrorists by the U.S. Department of Justice last year. We joke about it, but it's serious. Parents were locked out of most school buildings. An elected school board member in Norfolk was reprimanded for visiting a school building without an appointment. This isn't what local control is supposed to look like. Most parents and school board members don't yet understand how they have lost control over their schools. They just know that there's something different, and they have. As a grassroots leader, I hear all the stories, and they all start with these words: don't tell anyone my name. Veteran teachers are quitting for two reasons. One, they're getting no help with discipline problems, and two, they don't believe in the ideology they're being forced to impart to their students. They fear they will be fired or targeted by administrators if they complain, and when they feel defeated, they quit. Teachers are also parents, so parents' rights are also teachers' rights. The primary fear of both groups is that their children will be bullied at school if they speak up. This has happened so often that school board candidates have begun to make alternate arrangements for their children before they announce. You've heard testimony of the young man in Seward who had to quit football due to being targeted by his coach so relentlessly. His sin was that his mother ran for school board. School districts fear being sued. They fear the ACLU and the teachers' unions, but they do not fear parents or teachers. The obscenity exemption protects the school porn, and the private vendor contracts protect the curriculum. If a parent tries to make an ethics complaint to the Nebraska Professional Practices Commission, the complaint must first be vetted by the Nebraska Commissioner of Education. Our last commissioner was so much a part of the problem that people stopped reporting. Parents deserve the right to direct their children's upbringing. In 2005, the Ninth Circuit Court ruled that parents have no constitutional right to prevent a public school from providing its students with whatever information it wishes to provide, sexual or otherwise. This ruling created an anti-parent precedent and made it necessary for states to enumerate parental rights in state law. In Nebraska, parents' rights to direct their child's upbringing regarding values and religion are being routinely violated. Nebraskans support the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and oppose discrimination, yet discrimination is being implemented. Our Commissioner of Education in June of 2020 declared that Nebraska schools would henceforth promote anti-racism, trauma-informed care, restorative justice, and culturally responsive teaching, which we now know the new way to say CRT. All of these phrases are from Marxist teachings. Those policies are still in place today, as are the links on the NDE website. In small-town Nebraska, a white teenager was isolated in a corner of the room and berated as a racist when he refused to agree with the teacher's characterization of white people. That courageous boy testified before this committee earlier this year. But even more alarming, in my opinion, was that the rest of the class was forced to admit they were racist so they could avoid standing in the corner. Parents are not on board with discrimination of any kind and do not want their children taught that some types of discrimination are acceptable and others are not, based on immutable characteristics. We talked about the West Side video. Parents have seen it and other exposés. There is little that a school could do that is more disrespectful to parents than intentionally lie to them. Yet that is now the acceptable daily practice of many school personnel. Parents who are trying to instill religious values in their children are being undermined by the schools. Social emotional learning, which is now called transformative social emotional learning, because the purpose of it, admitted by the companies who sell it, is to transform the culture, is immersing students in moral relativism. Each person decides what is moral depending on how they feel. There's your truth and there's my truth in moral relativism. The explosion in unruly student behavior is not being helped by SEL, it's being exacerbated by SEL. Religion is about moral absolutes. Thou shalt not steal isn't followed by unless you have a good reason. For the devout, there is only one truth. A COSAD mother became alarmed when first graders were being taught anti-racism, and her second grader suddenly thought he was a Buddhist. When she arrived to her appointment with the principal, she was told that an attorney had been consulted, and they could force her son to attend the lessons. She took it as a threat, just as it was intended. Several times at state board meetings, the undermining of faith was brought up by the public. Senator Kavanaugh responded, quote, "If you don't like it, you can homeschool," unquote. So the goal apparently is to eliminate families of faith from public schools. Message received. School districts are prohibited from discussing sex, religion, politics, mental health, or family issues with a student, but Second Step or Panorama are not. They are not prohibited from gathering and selling your data. If you are using a CASEL compliant curriculum, which somebody just did an advertisement for CASEL, your personal answers to every lesson are going right into the international cloud to be purchased by anyone. There are no laws that protect that data. SEL is big business and big money because data is worth big money. If you sync your Chromebook to your phone, every text and email could be collected. If you had a fight with your parent that morning, you might be individually targeted with a prompt on your Chromebook to visit the counselor. The same counselor who may be highly trained in saving you from your parents by altering your pronouns. Teachers are now trained to have students click an emoji on how they feel that day. Why does the teacher need to know how students feel before they teach math or reading? They don't. It's used to target and emotionally control the students. It's being sold to the public and the teachers as good for mental health, when it is actually mind control, individualized to the child. In fact, some of the more recent ed tech companies are bragging about how they individualize their curriculums. When artificial intelligence is part of the equation, the child will have no defense against it, and the values of the family will cease to matter. Imagine 20 years from now, your child wants to get a mortgage or buy a gun or run for elected office. Will his health test answer from 7th grade come back to haunt him? A graduate of social emotional learning, no doubt. Ask yourself why reading is being taught with computer-generated curriculum instead of with books. Books are easier and more fun to read, but the digital companies can't control content or mine data from books. Parents deserve to know what their children are being taught. School administrators are admitting to playing cat and mouse with parents. Third-party SEL and curriculum programs are unaccountable to anyone. The law does not protect students from the information imparted nor gathered, and textbooks are becoming obsolete. Second Step is one of the most popular SEL programs used in Nebraska schools. It has a lesson for first graders that I gave you all a picture of, a slide of in front of you. It's called Question Objective Reality. The teacher's guide said the purpose of the lesson is to, quote, get the students to ignore what they see and to question their internal beliefs, unquote. You can see it right on the slide. It's right from the school curriculum. Those would be the same internal beliefs that their parents taught them. The teacher is to convince 6-year-olds not to believe their own eyes, convince them that a blue square is actually a circle. What is the purpose of this lesson? Ask yourself that. Middle school is replete with lessons on how to do direct action for social justice. Transgenderism is part of the curriculum from kindergarten on. The programs for math, reading, science, and social studies all include CRT, and it's impossible to opt out of the ideological indoctrination because it is so pervasive. SAVIS has a history curriculum being implemented in Nebraska. Their website brags that they focus on culturally responsive teaching, which we know is CRT. Their curriculum writers are doctorate-level critical race theorists. Even if parents are fully aware of all of this, what can they do? Parents across the state have tried to get access to various online lessons. They are told that the software is proprietary and it's not allowed to be shared. And sometimes they're told they can sit in the office and view it. I think that came up once today. But that could take weeks. The worst parts of the curricula are hidden in the videos, which take time to find and review. Getting access through public records requests has not succeeded. The fact is, the curriculum vendors are private companies and therefore are protected from the public record statutes. The curriculum vendors can alter the content at any time, as Lisa pointed out. Teachers on curriculum committees have complained of a bait and switch where objectionable parts are hidden until after the purchase is complete. And then the teachers have to spend their time picking through the bad stuff to find lessons they feel they can use. Transparency doesn't mean posting a lesson on the school website, as much as that's well-intentioned. Transparency means giving parents the key code to the online curriculum so they can see it in real time, because it's changing in real time. Nowhere in the digital world are parents expected to entrust their children to an online entity with no oversight, except in education. The Panhandle School of Gordon Rushville has a school board that roundly condemned comprehensive sexuality education when it was proposed. Meanwhile, a curriculum director was implementing 2 CSE programs in their school quietly behind the backs of the parents and the school board. The most egregious form of sex ed is pornography. Anyone who attended the hearing for LB 441 this past session, Senator Wayne, I'm sorry, isn't here because he got to listen to that, heard a lot of pornography straight from the libraries of schools in Nebraska. These books had both pictures and words that meet Nebraska's statutory definition of obscenity. Themes of rape, violence, suicide, and prostitution are presented to minors without meaningful context. A Kearney mother spent 9 months jumping through all the hoops thrown at her by the KPS book challenge system. The books were rated as equivalent to an X-rated movie on booklooks.org. Board members said that they did not want their own children reading this content, but when they had the opportunity to vote on it, they voted to keep it. And then they voted to abolish the book challenge policy. The current KPS policy is this: parents can choose to segregate their children from the library, all or none. Teachers deserve free speech. Many Nebraska teachers are not on board with the online curriculums, the pervasive ideological and anti-Christian slant, the overt sexualization, and the loss of their autonomy in teaching. These teachers are methodically being weeded out. They have been threatened repeatedly with the loss of their jobs, the loss of their union benefits, or just living with a target on their back from administrators and fellow teachers. The Parents' Bill of Rights also needs to protect teachers. Nothing can improve regarding schools if the insiders are afraid to speak. Bennington schools were questioned about the CRT in their SEL curriculum. Parents asked, what if this curriculum contradicts the firmly held beliefs of teachers? Their response was chilling. Quote, Bennington teachers may share concerns about lessons that make them uncomfortable. This is a sign to administration that additional training is needed, unquote. In other words, teachers will need to alter their firmly held beliefs. A second grade teacher is uncomfortable teaching about Greek gods. It's confusing to 7-year-old children whose families worship one God. According to state standards, these are middle school topics, yet she's being forced to teach it in 2nd grade. A Lincoln curriculum director was just as shocked as the parent when a preteen student was forced to answer questions about her sexuality on a required online health test, which is illegal, by the way, it violates PPRA. An experienced language arts teacher quit rather than conform to the online lessons. My job was to make the students love reading, she said. I'm supposed to read a script and follow along. They don't need me. So she quit. An urban teacher is fed up with the constant equity training. She has been told by her principal to deny that it's CRT, although she knows it is. She knows that she won't be bringing her kids to this school district unless things completely change. And she says many teachers agree with her, but are afraid to speak. When asked if ideology is making her want to quit her job, she said, I'm 70% there. Currently, we have teachers who live in fear of speaking up because they might lose their job and their kids will be bullied. Parents are afraid to speak up because they have been dismissed and lied to, and their kids have been bullied. Good people resist running for school board because they will be demonized and their kids will be bullied. Opponents will say that LB 374 is imposing the state's will on local school districts. That's the view of the people who are profiting. A few administrators, the curriculum vendors, the data collectors, and the unions. But the majority of parents and teachers see their beloved schools being destroyed from within. They would be willing to fight this battle, but they will not tolerate their children being collateral damage. A parents' rights bill is necessary for families. The big money will be against it. The teachers' unions are terrified of transparency, as you've learned with the opportunity scholarships. There must be a point where the welfare of students and their families becomes more important than profit. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Greenwald. Any questions? Yes, Senator Conrad.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Greenwald, for being here. You covered a lot of topics in your testimony, and I know you're a frequent advocate at the local level and at the state level as well. But I did just want to lift up, because it was common thread in your testimony and Mr. Penner's as well, that there were allegations of quote unquote porn in our school libraries. So as you know, the sale or distribution of obscene materials to minors is illegal under Nebraska law. My question to you is, have you made any complaints to county attorneys about this potential illegal activity happening in our schools? And if not, why?
Are you familiar, or were you present when we did the hearing on 441?
I'm not on the Judiciary Committee,
Okay.
but I did have an opportunity to review some of the testimony online that evening. It was a late hearing, I remember.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Senator. So you know that currently there's an exemption for librarians and schools on those obscenity laws. So that when you say, have we made it yes, people have made complaints to law enforcement, but because of the obscenity exemption for schools, there's not much they can do.
So there has been no legal finding that there is porn or obscene materials in Nebraska libraries and Nebraska schools.
Well, I'm not sure I can answer that question because I'm not a lawyer.
Well, I did just want to make sure that, I mean, I think we can have different points of view and discuss them respectfully, but it's really important that we have a factual record when we're talking about especially hot button issues. So I did just want to make sure to clarify for the record. And if you find information otherwise and you want to supplement that to the committee, that's always appreciated as well.
Thank you.
Dr. Greenwald, you noted that you were concerned about discipline problems in our schools. We share your concerns. We as the committee have looked at a lot of different solutions to figure out how to address concerning behaviors so that we can support teachers and so that kids have an opportunity to learn. Social emotional learning techniques have shown to advance pro-social behaviors and decrease negative behaviors in the classroom. So if you reject those, what is your solution to address student discipline problems?
Actually, that isn't true.
I'm sorry?
The social emotional learning companies advertise that they improve classroom behavior, but in fact, they don't. And in fact, if you are looking at studies that are not being done by the companies selling the product.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm looking at objective academic studies.
If most of those studies are being done by companies selling the product. So if you want to share that with me, I could be happy to look at it. But what I have seen is that social emotional learning, the longer you have it, the worse behavior gets and the worse reading gets. It's correlated with social emotional learning is correlated with decreasing reading proficiency.
And do you have some sources or citations that you could share with the committee?
I will find that for you.
Okay, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And then my question though, again, was if you reject those as solutions to address behavioral issues in the classroom, what solutions are you offering to address behavioral issues in the classroom?
There were, a lot of us went to school for a lot of years and didn't have behavioral issues in the classroom, and there was no social emotional learning. So now that we have social emotional learning, all the behavior issues are worse. So to me, correlation is not causation, but obviously those two things, the social emotional learning is certainly not helping. People were able to manage classrooms for generations before social emotional learning came along.
Right. And I think you were present for Mr. Penner's testimony when he did acknowledge that we've had techniques and strategies tied to social emotional learning in play for decades, like encouraging students to take a deep breath or to de-escalate a rowdy classroom situation. So I did just want to push back on that a little bit.
And I think that part of the issue here is that we're talking about two different animals.
Okay.
Because prior to 2020, social emotional learning was what you're talking about. In 2020, there was they changed it from social emotional learning to transformative social emotional learning. Transformative being where basically they added the critical race theory element to the other things that you've been talking about and bragged about and talk about transforming the culture. It's the same with CSE. If you go to the CCAS website that has CSE, they have everything on the website is about transforming the culture. Sex ed is what they say is their tool to do it. So it's transforming the culture is the goal. And that started in 2020. So I think a lot of the confusion that we have is that we have warm and fuzzy SEL prior to 2020, which was about getting along and understanding other people and all of the good things, taking a deep breath, things that you mentioned. But since 2020, SEL is about instilling critical race theory as part of the culture. And it's a different animal than it used to be.
Okay, I appreciate you sharing your perspective on that and definitely would look forward to any supplementary materials. Final question, Dr. Greenwald. You noted with concern, and Mr. Penner had a similar thread in his testimony, that you were concerned about a profit motive in education and some of these kinds of topics. Again, I think the record is clear that teachers don't make nearly enough for the hard work that they do in our communities, or paraprofessionals or lunch ladies or transportation employees as well. So I know that there's a lot of frontline educational professionals that really just don't go into it for the money. Now, it sounds like your quarrel perhaps is just with the fact that maybe teachers can unionize. Is that part of the problem?
I think you misunderstand what I'm saying when
Okay.
I talk about the profit motive.
Okay.
I'm not talking about the teachers. The teachers are totally below the level of where this is happening.
Okay.
It's happening in the ed tech. So you have, I'll give you an example. CKLA, Core Knowledge Language Arts. I'm trying to make a long story short, but.
That's okay. I can look it up too.
Okay. So Common Core came out during the Obama administration. It was pushed by Bill Gates. He put all his money and effort into it. He got it passed in the Obama administration. Nebraska rejected it. Common Core is basically you take all the standards and you federalize them. Nebraska said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to keep Nebraska standards. We like them better. Okay, all well and good. So then we have these curriculums that I'll use COSAT as an example because I talked to some people there. They need a new language arts curriculum. So they go to their ESU. The ESU says, use this one. And the staff looked at several and said, no, we really don't like that one. We like this one. And they said, no, you have to use this one because it's green on ed reports. Okay, so basically the ESU is telling the districts what to do. So there is no local control. I mean, local control is largely a myth in a lot of ways. But so Bennington spent $800,000 on CKLA. COSAT spent $150,000. It's all critical theory. It's the first lesson in first grade is about anti-racism. It's a video about a coach gives a little softball player a Band-Aid, and she gives him a whole lecture about how the Band-Aid is the wrong color. And it just goes on from there. I could give you lots of examples, but I think,
yeah,
the point is it was pushed by the ESUs based on ed reports. I looked up ed reports. Ed reports is a curriculum rating site that rates curriculum based on how well it conforms to Common Core. And not coincidentally, all of the curriculum that is rated high in ed reports is also high, it also has a lot of critical race theory involved in it, embedded in it. So then I looked up, who's ed reports and why did they suddenly become God and decide whoever, who should have what curriculum? Well, guess who started ed reports? Bill Gates.
Okay. So
you've got a billionaire who is associated with the World Economic Forum, not only puts Common Core into place, but then puts a rating system into place to make sure that even states who don't accept his curriculum prioritize it over all other options.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And then just a final question, Dr. Greenwald, because you noted concern about profit incentives. You run a PAC, and you're here as a representative of a political action committee. Is that right?
We did end up getting into it only because there was no way to be heard otherwise.
Okay. And so when you organize or advocate, which is your First Amendment right, you seek donations for those that share your beliefs. And when you have public forums or perhaps even related to this testimony today?
Well, everybody gets donations, and I gather that you probably get donations from the NEA. And so, we are where we are.
I agree that absolutely everyone in a democratic society has a right to organize and petition their government and to use their time and their talent and their resources to support like-minded candidates. But I did just want to be clear that while I respect and appreciate your professional expertise as a former pediatrician, that you're here today with a political agenda as the leader of a political action committee purporting to put forward specific support for specific candidates at the state and local level to challenge existing educational standards.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, Senator, but I do not accept that premise.
Okay, please let me know what you see your perspective as.
Yes, we do have a PAC. Yes, we raise money for the PAC. But that's not why I'm here today.
Okay.
I'm here today because I was invited to educate people on a subject I've done a lot of research on. And that's the only reason I'm here today, because I feel it's important for all of you to know what you're up against. You have no idea the data being collected on your children.
Let me tell you, Dr. Greenwald, I think that you could probably find a lot of common ground across the political spectrum with myself and other parents that are very concerned about the pernicious effect and unintended consequences when it comes to not only big government, but big data and big tech. And I think that there are some really smart solutions that our sister states are looking at to protect student privacy and to address these kinds of issues. I know that there's been some really cool things happening in Utah and some other states that are looking at a way to protect personal privacy. And so I think maybe even if we have a disagreement about some of these other issues, I think you're going to find a lot of agreement from me about ways that we can protect student privacy and family privacy from government overreach and from
Absolutely.
Big corporations. So, I'm definitely going to carry that opportunity forward beyond this hearing. And maybe this is a bright spot in this hearing for me, that even if we have some different points of view on some other issues, we can find this nugget to work together on into the coming year.
I would welcome that, Senator.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Any other questions for Dr. Greenwald, including Senator Albright? I got one. The transparency part of it, you mentioned key codes for curriculum. Any other, that I'm not sure about you mentioned that by law that maybe that can't be done, but any other
by
ideas
law,
on
it maybe can't be
transparency?
done because these are third-party companies, they're private. so they don't have to give up their proprietary data. Yet that proprietary data is being used to, in my opinion, indoctrinate our children. I don't know what else you can call it when you have lessons telling kids in first grade not to believe their own eyes. And that's why I'm here today, because this is not easy. There is nothing easy about what's going on. If it were me, if I had a child in school today, I would unplug them completely and I would just use books, because books can't be collected or hacked or sold. Your data can't be sold. And the personal questions that are being asked of students, the very personal questions about transgender and their sexuality and their thoughts on different things. In SEL, they ask them very personal questions. And those questions are all, that data is all being gathered. And it will at some point be used against them. And this generation grew up with Facebook, and how many people have had their careers or their races or whatever derailed by something they put on Facebook when they were 15. Well, that's just child's play compared to what's going on now. And the people who are gathering this data do not have good intentions. And it's a much bigger problem when the school board member said, well, we are very transparent. We put this out, we put that out. That's all great. But literally the school board members do not know the extent of this. There's very few people who really understand the extent. And I've had to do a lot of digging and research. I'm finding out that Ed Reports is Bill Gates. For God's sake, Bill Gates is choosing our curriculum through our ESUs. I mean, how much more insane does it get? You couldn't, if you wrote this as a fiction, nobody would believe you. So I'm not here for me. This has nothing to do with me. I don't even have kids in school, but I've looked up enough. I've looked into the things, and the deeper you go, the worse it gets. And it all goes back to the World Economic Forum. And they want to give your kids a social credit score. If you listen to, and I know I'm sounding like a crazy conspiracy theorist here, totally understand, but if you go to what they say that children will have an employability score. And when I say when the crazy people speak, you should believe them. And the crazy people are at the World Economic Forum, and they want to give your child an employability score. How employable your child will be when they graduate and leave and go into the world, if they have their way, is based on how well they have been trained to not believe their own eyes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
And we have one more testifier, Lori Samuelson. She's a school psychologist for Hastings Public Schools. Good afternoon, Lori. Almost
Hello.
evening.
Good afternoon to all. My name is Lori Samuelson. The spelling of my name is as follows: LORISAMUELSON. I have worked as a school psychologist in the state of Nebraska for 35 years. As a school psychologist, my primary responsibility is to conduct individual student evaluations to determine whether or not a student meets the necessary criteria to qualify for special education services. I determine which areas or skills need to be assessed for a child. These evaluations often encompass cognitive, academic, behavioral, as well as speech and language assessments. I am responsible for conducting the cognitive and behavioral assessments and classroom observations. Other members of the multidisciplinary team administer the academic assessments and the speech and language assessments. We then meet with parents, review the testing information with them, and as a team determine what disability category the child qualifies for using the Nebraska Department of Education Rule 51 guidelines. If a child does qualify for special education services, the team then works with the parent to develop an individual education plan. I also work with teachers as part of a multi-tiered system of support team at the schools I serve. Areas that I assist in as part of that team include helping to develop academic and behavioral interventions. If a child is having difficulty with behaviors, I am the primary person that develops a functional behavior analysis workup, which can then be used to develop a behavior intervention plan. As a school psychologist, I have always had high respect for the National Association of School Psychologists organization, as I have always felt that they have put forth best practices and solid empirical research in the areas of instruction, interventions, and curriculum. As of late, however, my opinion of this organization and the state school psychology organization has changed drastically. In October of 2022, I was excited to attend the Nebraska School Psychology Conference here in Lincoln. I felt it was important to gain new knowledge so that I can provide the best services to students, parents, and the schools that I work in. However, I was very disappointed in the keynote speaker's presentation, which was information on confronting our own biases towards other races, information on oppression, levels of oppression that are experienced by individuals, cycles of oppression, social justice, tools for understanding privilege and marginalization, and developing cultural humility. I am all for multicultural awareness, as it plays a huge part in how I work with students, parents, and teachers of different races and different backgrounds. It is important to understand how individuals of different cultures may communicate differently, may respond to an incident differently, and even learn differently. However, I feel very strongly that all lives matter. Due to my strong feelings that all children are important, no matter their race, socioeconomic background, or country of origin, I have not felt comfortable looking through the diversity, inclusion, and equity, or DEI lens that my professional organizations are wanting me to look through. This lens doesn't allow us to see the whole picture of a child. Let me tell you what happens when you disagree with this lens, especially if you complain about it on the Protect Nebraska Children Facebook page. You get reported to HR. HR comes and talks to you. Then your state organization sends an email to all the members, shaming you on your disagreement and reiterating the standards and ethics of the organization, including their position on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how to also refute complaints on critical race theory. I do not believe that issues of oppression, privilege, minoritization, and marginalization are issues that need to take precedence in education. But here we are. With so many children now having academic skill deficits due to the shutdown of schools during COVID, we have to be doing our best teaching day in and day out from the time school begins to the last dismissal bell. Also, behavior flows where attention goes. By focusing on the differences among individuals, the aggressions, microaggressions, and systemic racism, we are losing focus on what is really important in the K-12 education system, which is teaching reading, math, and written language. Having these skills, especially in the area of reading, is what will change a child's life path. To lose sight of the importance of teaching academics is nothing short of educational neglect. If we are focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion, and critical race theory, we are crippling our children's problem-solving skills as well. The primary character deficit I see with children in the classroom is their inability to take responsibility for their actions when they have done something wrong. They are quick to blame someone else or make an excuse for what they have done. Social emotional learning also comes into play. I do feel students need to be taught social skills and how to identify and manage their emotions. However, in my opinion, social emotional learning went down a slippery slope beginning in 2020. At that time, the collaboration of academics and social emotional learning group, also known as CASEL, began to include critical race theory ideology and gender ideology information into social emotional learning materials. This became known as transformative SEL. CASEL touts solid research showing that SEL programs improve students' test scores, Really, what tests are they talking about? A further look into Castle research studies shows that they were not well done empirically. A review by the RAND Corporation in 2017 divided 68 SEL studies into 3 tiers of rigor. Out of the top tier of rigor, none of the studies were able to show benefits to academic achievement. The companies that publish SEL materials and curriculum are trying to sell a product. Therefore, schools should be wary of what they are purchasing. So I have been talking a lot about what I don't like. So now I would like to talk to you about what I do feel is beneficial to students. At one of the schools where I work, Longfellow Elementary, 4 main character traits are taught, emphasized, and reinforced. The main character traits that Longfellow focuses on are integrity, respect, responsibility, and compassion. By teaching these character traits and infusing them throughout the school day, students know what behaviors are expected of them. Teachers expect and reinforce these behaviors in the classroom, in the hallway during transitions, and in the cafeteria. Longfellow has also been recognized as a National School of Character. At Lincoln Elementary, where there is school-wide breakfast served to all students, students eat their breakfast in the classroom while watching a morning show developed by the school counselor. This morning show has a brief video based on a character trait or situation. The teachers lead the class in a brief discussion as to what could be done to show safe, respectful, and responsible behavior. There is also a skill of the week to practice, such as how to follow directions. The morning show allows for common language throughout the school so teachers, paras, and even janitors can reinforce a student when they are exhibiting a skill or good character trait during the day. It also builds a sense of community within the classroom. The elementary counselors at both buildings have weekly guidance lessons in the classroom. The primary behavior skills they teach include topics such as learning about emotions, how to identify them, and how to manage strong emotions. They also teach about kindness, empathy, and problem solving. If a child is struggling with a behavior or skill that prevents them from being a good learner, the counselor may invite them to be a part of a small group which works on the skill, but only if parent permission is granted. Both schools use the Behavior Intervention Support Team process, also known as BIST. BIST is a process that helps students develop emotional awareness and positive coping skills. If a child is missing a certain behavior skill, replacement skills are taught, practiced, and reinforced. The goals for life that we work towards are 1, I can make good choices even if I am mad. 2, I can be okay even when others are not okay. And 3, I can do something even if I don't want to or even if it's hard. The ways that Longfellow and Lincoln Elementary are working with students to develop good character and appropriate social and emotional skills is beneficial to a child in that it helps them be a good learner and therefore more engaged in classroom instruction. Teachers are able to spend more time teaching, which is of the utmost importance. Lastly, I would like to voice my support of LB 374 for the following reasons. It is important to involve parents in their child's education. As a school psychologist, when the school partners with parents, better results are achieved. Parents should not be shut out and not be allowed to review curriculum or teaching materials. Based on my experience this past fall, Section 3, Parts 8 and 10 are my favorites, as this protects my civil rights as well. 3, I like the language of the bill stating that learning materials do not include academic assessments, individual education plans, or Section 504 plans. Section 9 is especially well written as subsection 6A, 6B, 6C, 6D separate a suicide risk assessment or screening tool from assessments that may be part of an SEL curriculum, such as an attitude or belief assessment. This section also states that a suicide risk assessment can be administered to a student before a parent has been contacted if the school has attempted to notify a parent, but the parent cannot be reached. Also, if information from the risk assessment being shared with the parent might endanger that child, the school is not required to share the results with the parent. This would be especially important if the parent was the perpetrator of child abuse or neglect. This concludes my testimony. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you, Lori. Any questions for Ms. Samuelson? I have this, I think the same questions I've asked several. Any way in particular that you could encourage parental involvement in education? I know, schools always have encouraged parent-teacher conferences and parents being at extracurricular activities and those kinds of things. But as far as just knowing what's being taught without, taking a lot of time to go to the school on a specific day or something, just to do it online or something like that at their convenience.
I feel like getting the parents that need to be at the school to come to the school is oftentimes different. But then oftentimes, if you look at different cultures place different amounts of importance on a school, on the education. And you just need to be aware of what factors there might be with a family. And sometimes scheduling becomes an issue, because if the family is just barely getting by financially, they are often working jobs, and more than one job. So oftentimes it is difficult to find a time to communicate with parents or to get them to come into the school, especially during parent-teacher conferences. I feel like schools always need to be cognizant of being welcoming to all parents. And when it comes right down to it, parents are human too. No matter what type or what background of parents you have, they all care about their kids. And once you give them positive information about their kids and how much you care for their kids, that oftentimes opens up more of a conversation with that parent.
Sure. Thank you very much for your insight. And thank you for your testimony. Any other questions, including Senator Albright, Senator Conrad?
Thank you, Chair Merman, and thank you so much for being here. I love the last part of your testimony when you were talking about the common ground in care and concern and passion that all parents have for their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm hopeful that we can build on that foundation and those shared values to let that help shape our public policy to advance those shared interests. So I really appreciate that. I did just want to ask one question in regards to a component of your testimony that you expressed a lot of grave concern about a professional development speaker that was maybe a part of your annual conference, or is that right? So I know as a licensed attorney, I have to take like 10 hours a year of professional development to keep my law license up, right? And as part of that, sometimes I attend conferences or seminars with speakers that maybe I disagree with, or that maybe have a different point of view than my own. But I don't see that as detrimental. I think that can be really interesting to challenging perhaps your own biases or experiences, or even if we ultimately agree to disagree, like it really doesn't bother me as a professional that other people have different points of view. So I'm not sure that was your intention in lifting up the concern you had about your professional development speaker, but I did just want to maybe note for the record or provide you an opportunity to respond that in the marketplace of ideas, the way to address issues or speech that we disagree with is with speech, is not with censorship. Would you disagree with that?
My frustration from that and what I tried to get across in my testimony is that we've got bigger fish to fry in education.
I agree with you 100%.
If I take a day off from work where I am busy and I I was just so frustrated. It's like I was looking for information on how to manage behaviors or, teaching reading. Oh my goodness. And you're going to waste my day on that? I was just very frustrated. And then heaven forbid you would complain because then you get called out.
Sure.
So I know there are differing opinions, and good grief, I'm in a profession where you look at all angles, but my organization is telling me, oh, you need to look through this angle. I disagree. I feel like there are many aspects to a child that might be affecting how they perform in school. So we will have to respectfully agree to disagree on that, because I'm sorry, when there are bigger issues facing us in education, then let's get to the real issues.
Yes, I think that would be a sound solution for all of us to focus on teacher shortage, behavioral issues in schools, school resources, test scores. I think that would be great. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Ms. Samuelson.
Okay.
Well, I want to thank the committee for being here and all of the testifiers. I think it was a productive hearing. Of course, the goal of myself and all of the committee, I know, is to do what's best for students. And we need everyone working together, parents, teachers, administrators, to do that. I combined these three LRs because, well, for one thing, so you wouldn't have to come to Lincoln so often for those of us that travel, but also, and by the way, I think we have 8 LRs referred to the committee, but I think they fit together because parents do need to somehow be more knowledgeable of what is being taught in the schools. And, with activities and parents working, as mentioned, and everything, that's probably a lot more difficult now than it used to be, because it used to be, kids would usually be home in the evening quite often and do homework there at home and around the kitchen table maybe. So it was a little easier to see what was going on. And of course, with the pandemic, it became a little more transparent, which is a good thing. What was the kids were being taught. So, and of course, the federal funding, I wanted to see if there was a connection with the federal funding with these, what's being taught. And also SEL is a popular thing now in schools in Nebraska, and I think nationwide. So wanted to see what kind of connections there are there. So like I said, the goal is to all of us to work together to improve the education system and do what's best for the students. So with that, I'll take any questions anybody might have. And I guess I should clarify one thing. With slavery, I just want to make it clear, slavery is evil. And I may have been misunderstood with that, but slavery is totally evil. So just want to clarify that. Any other questions? Any questions? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Paige.
Thank you, Senator.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.